Ding-dang, a crisp bell rang in the coffee shop. A woman with dark green bangs and a white dress looked up at the door. This woman had 3 round tears under her eyes, which made her look different. A hand covered her mouth. The woman in white looked at the people who came in and said softly, "Welcome." Oh. Ichigo, who opened the door and walked in, folded his hands in front of his chest. His eyes were full of love, and he almost didn't know where to look. Is this heaven? Seeing Ichigo standing next to him in such a shameful manner, Ichigo immediately felt a sense of shame. He hurriedly dodged and drew a line between him and Ichigo so as not to be treated as a fellow who was as shameful as him. "Hurry up and go in. What are you doing blocking the door?" A hand suddenly moved from the back to Ichigo's shoulder, waking him up from his previous fantasy. Ichigo turned around in dissatisfaction, still thinking about who was the one who was so insensible as to interrupt him. So it's Chizuru-senpai. Please come in first." Seeing her senior, Chizuru, standing behind him, Ichigo immediately lowered his posture and made way for her without saying a word. Ichigo, you performed very well. Don't say that I don't take care of you. I am very familiar with the girls here. I can introduce you to them. Senpai, you are really too kind." Ichigo looked at his senior, Chizuru, and almost fell to his knees on the spot. There was actually such a good benefit of being her junior. "Oh, I was still wondering why so many cute little students came here, so Chizuru brought you here." The woman in white covered her mouth and laughed softly. Her tone sounded very gentle, making Ichigo feel a burst of numbness in his heart. "Sister Sung-sun, these are my classmates, especially this one." Chizuru pulled Inoue Orihime to her side. Before she saw her face, Sung-sun first saw her chest, which made her feel inferior for a moment. "This is my most beloved, Orihime." Chizuru did not care about her shy behavior and hugged her from behind. Her hands passed through the back and wrapped around her body, making her originally big chest look even bigger. "Sure enough, she is a very beautiful lady." Seeing Inoue Orihime with a bit of shyness on her face, Sung-sun said, "And her appearance was really cute." "Let go of your hand, you pervert." A fist suddenly appeared from behind and smashed on the head of Chizuru, rescuing Inoue Orihime from her magic hand. "This little sister is also very cute." Seeing that the little girls seemed a little embarrassed, Sun brought them inside and found a place to sit down. "You guys, what do you want to order? Look at it yourself. Hurry up." Just as they sat down, a slightly ferocious voice suddenly came from beside them. At some point in time, a flat-chested woman had already walked over to them and casually threw a menu on their table. Her tone carried a trace of impatience. "What kind of service attitude are you guys having?" Seeing the behavior of the person who had come over, Ichigo immediately became dissatisfied. Originally, he did not want to participate in the gathering, but he really could not resist Ichigo's repeated requests. In the end, he had no choice but to agree to come. He did not expect to come to this coffee shop. He was already very unhappy. He did not expect that the waiter here would actually have this kind of service attitude. "Huh, what did you say? Kid, shouldn't you be more polite to your customer?" The flat-chested girl glared at Ichigo and swept her gaze over him. Her face was filled with displeasure. At the same time, her eyes revealed an ominous glint. She looked extremely ferocious. Even Ichigo, who had always been known as a delinquent and often fought with others, felt a sense of dread in his heart. However, even if he felt guilty in his heart, it was only a matter of an instant. Ichigo would absolutely not have the slightest bit of fear. Feeling the flat-chested girl's ferocious attitude, Ichigo immediately became angry and glared at the flat-chested girl without backing down. "Yo, Apache, do you feel a sense of accomplishment from bullying a child?" A teasing voice suddenly came from the side. A dark-skinned and burly girl walked over with a teasing expression on her face. She looked at the flat-chested girl who was currently staring at Ichigo with big eyes and small eyes. What? You stupid lion, what did you say? TSK. She curled her lips in disdain. The woman called Stupid Lion turned her eyes and glanced at the flat-chested girl called Apache. Her gaze then turned to Inoue Orihime. When she saw Inoue Orihime's chest, her eyes flashed with a smile. She looked at the flat-chested girl called Apache. Apache. What are you doing? Your chest is too small, so don't speak. What did you say? Having her flaws exposed in such a straightforward manner, Apache's face flashed with a trace of embarrassment. The flat chest had always been her complex. Although she had never denied it, being exposed in front of so many people still made her feel a sense of shame. Especially. His eyes swept over the innocent face of Inoue Orihime, who was sitting on the other side of the well. His eyes glanced at the proud breasts on her chest. A trace of anger flashed in Apache's eyes. He glared at Inoue Orihime, who did not know what to say. That. After suffering from an unexpected disaster and being glared at like this, Inoue Orihime felt a little embarrassed for no reason, as if it was because of her that she made others uncomfortable. With this thought in her heart, Inoue Orihime could not help but want to open her mouth to explain, but after talking for a long time, she still did not know what to say. In the end, she could only helplessly laugh a few times. This little girl. Seeing Inoue Orihime's reaction, Sun Chizuru helplessly patted her head. This girl was always like this, but it was also because of her that he couldn't help but feel pity for her. These guys. Wait, Ichigo. Just as he was about to get up and explode, Kigo suddenly secretly tugged at his clothes. At the same time, he tugged at the other person, a tall and sturdy boy who had been silent since the beginning. Look at that person over there. Kigo pulled him back and looked in the direction of his finger. A hint of horror flashed through Ichigo's eyes. It turned out that there was a huge man sitting in the place where Kigo pointed. Yes, it was huge. The man was at least as big as several normal people. Just sitting there was much taller than ordinary people. And the cute boy who had been sitting on the side suddenly spoke. His expression was still calm, but his eyes flashed with wisdom. The words he said were not as calm as the expression on his face. You should have noticed it as well. This coffee shop is very strange. It is obviously lunchtime, but there are not many people here. Isn't it strange? Even the people who stay here look strange. Ichigo and the others looked around and were immediately shocked. Indeed, there were not many people here, and each and every one of them looked a little strange. Not to mention the huge uncle over there. He looked like a staff member of the shop. However, the people sitting here drinking coffee all dressed strangely. None of them looked normal. Ms. Wiro, what are you trying to say? As you can see, this place is too abnormal, and the person who brought us here is also Chizuru. Speaking of this, the cute boy called Ms. Wiro stopped, but everyone already understood what he meant. In their eyes, this girl called Chizuru could also be classified as an abnormal person. Could it be? The boys looked at each other and thought of some extremely terrible ideas. It was indeed not a normal place. You too. At this time, Tatsuki suddenly slapped the table and suddenly stood up. He looked at the two noisy women in front of him with some anger on his face. Seeing Tatsuki suddenly burst out, Ichigo and the others were shocked. Were they going to fight so soon? Although Ichigo and Sato Yasutora were very good at fighting, they were not arrogant to the point of not knowing what was good for them. Let's not talk about anything else. Let's just talk about the big and terrifying uncle over there. It was estimated that he alone was enough to take out both of them. Although the uncle looked very kind. Hearing the loud scolding behind them, the flat-chested girl and the tall and sturdy woman who was originally noisy turned their heads at the same time and looked at Tatsuki, who stood up. The atmosphere at the scene suddenly froze. Shit. It was over. Feeling the change in the atmosphere, Ichigo and Sato looked at each other. Their bodies instantly tensed up. As two people who had been fighting together for a long time, they could tell each other's thoughts with a single glance. The two of them were already prepared to fight, even though it might be a fierce battle this time. "What's wrong, Mila Rose, Apache, Sung-sun?" Suddenly, a voice came. It was clearly very close, but before the voice came out, not a single one of them noticed it. Haribel-sama. Upon hearing this voice, regardless of whether it was the flat-chested girl who was still making a ruckus just now, the burly, dark-skinned woman, or the white-clothed woman who was watching the show from the side, all of them turned around respectfully and lowered their heads to look at a woman who had walked over at some unknown time. This woman had wheat-colored skin, golden hair, exquisite facial features, and a fiery figure. The moment she appeared, she immediately attracted everyone's attention. Her entire body emitted a silent aura that attracted everyone's gazes, making it so that no one could ignore her existence. Even the previously completely uninterested Ichigo had a flash of amazement in his eyes. This was the first time he had seen such a woman. Although she was a woman, she exuded an indescribable domineering aura, making him feel a sense of oppression. If one were to say that Ichigo was impressed by the sudden appearance of Haribel, then at this moment, there was only admiration in Tatsuki's eyes. Tatsuki had always been a very strong girl. The moment she saw Haribel, she was immediately attracted by the domineering aura of the woman on Haribel's body. It was a temperament that no one could ignore, a temperament that made people can't help but admire. "What's wrong?" Her gaze swept over this group of students. Haribel looked at the three people standing at the side, including Mila Rose. "It's nothing, Haribel-sama. This is just a daily interaction between the two of them, but this time, it seems to have disturbed the children who came here to play." Sung-sun covered his mouth and said with a soft smile. "Sung-sun, what did you say? Who has a close relationship with that girl?" The two of them said at the same time. After hearing what the other person said to them, the two of them immediately turned their heads, looking awkward. "Look. Even your words and actions are the same. Don't deny it anymore. I already know. Sung-sun, you bastard." Another two completely synchronized shouts. "All right." Seeing that the three of them were about to start arguing again, Haribel said indifferently. Immediately, the three of them fell silent, looking like obedient children. Ichigo and Sato, who were watching from the side, clicked their tongues in amazement. They didn't know what kind of character this woman who appeared later on was. She was actually able to calm the three of them down with a single sentence. Although they didn't understand the reason behind this, it couldn't stop their admiration for Haribel. Right now, all of them were filled with respect for Haribel, like a torrential river. "You are Chizuru, right?" Haribel suddenly turned to look at Chizuru, who was sitting on the other side, and said indifferently. His tone was as cold as ever. "Yes. I didn't expect you to know me. You often come here. I still have some impression of you. Moreover, you have a good relationship with Lily and the others." Haribel said calmly, then turned to Sung-sun, who was standing on the side, and said, "Since I brought my classmates here today, today's expenses will all be on my account." After saying that, Haribel nodded at them and turned to leave. Although he had left, just a short period of time had left a deep impression on everyone present. At this moment, a piece of music suddenly sounded without warning. With the beat of the notes, a movement suddenly sounded in the coffee shop. Hearing the sudden sound of music, a few people came back to their senses from the shock that Haribel had left them before, and then they listened to the music in their ears. A musical piece has never been heard before, but it is very nice. Is it a song written by this cafe staff? The cute boy on the side closed his eyes and listened for a while, then opened his eyes and said, with some admiration in his tone. Even if it is not a song written by oneself, just having the ability to play this piece is already very admirable. Ms. Wiro, do you have any research on music? Hearing Ms. Wiro's evaluation, Tatsuki asked curiously. Well, it's nothing. I just have a little understanding of it under the influence of others. Mizuiro waved his hand and said modestly. It's that big sister again, right? Mizuiro, you bastard. Upon hearing Mizuiro's words, Kigo seemed to have suddenly thought of something. He had an expression of envy and jealousy on his face as he spoke in a sour tone. As he spoke, he stretched out his hand and fiercely patted Mizuiro's shoulder. Is that so? I didn't expect you to be such a person. Hee hee. Upon hearing Tatsuki's words, the small Mizuiro only smiled faintly and did not make any excuses. As the last note fell, a slightly exaggerated voice suddenly sounded in the coffee shop. Ah! This is music. This is art. Hearing this exclamation that suddenly came, a drop of cold sweat slid down the foreheads of the group of people sitting there. There was always a strange feeling. This sigh tone, this emotional tone. Come to think of it, Chizuru, you should know all these people here, right? As if suddenly remembering something, Tatsuki turned his head to look at Chizuru, who was sitting at the side, her tone carrying a bit of curiosity. I don't know either. You don't know either. The surrounding people looked at Chizuru strangely. After all, whether it was the white-clothed woman called Sungsun or the extremely charming woman called Harabel who appeared later, they seemed to know each other. And the woman called Harabel also said that Chizuru was very familiar with a person called Lily. Logically, she should know everyone here. Seeing the questioning looks in everyone's eyes, Chizuru explained. It's mainly because there are too many people in this coffee shop. Every time I come, I can almost see different people, so I don't know if I know everyone here. Then this is really a strange coffee shop. Hearing what Chizuru said, everyone present nodded. In this case, this coffee shop was really a bit different. Moreover, this place was different from the other cafes. The people here did not have a fixed standard suit. Everyone wore their own unique clothes. Just this alone made this place different from all the other cafes. Soon, all the things that everyone wanted had been served. After a period of time, they gradually felt familiar with this unique coffee shop. They sat together and began to chat happily. Just as everyone gradually started to enjoy themselves. Chizuru. With a tender voice, a cute little girl ran to their table, her face full of joy. Lilinette. I thought you weren't here today. I didn't expect you to be here today. These are my classmates. You can play with us. Okay, okay. Hearing Chizuru's invitation, Lilinette had a happy smile on his face and sat in the middle of them without any trace of embarrassment. Lilinette, this is. Everyone looked at this little girl in front of them. They only felt that what they saw in front of them was beyond their understanding. The little girl in front of them was indeed cute and likable, but this dress was really too beyond their knowledge. No matter how they looked at it, the dress on her body had nothing to do with the little girl at all. You bastard. As if suddenly remembering something, Tatsuki gritted his teeth and looked at Chizuru. Her eyes were full of anger and contempt. This is just a child. I didn't expect you. Thinking of this, everyone thought in their minds for a moment, and then they all looked at Chizuru. What are you thinking about? Don't look at me with such strange eyes. I didn't do anything. Feeling the eyes of everyone looking at her, Chizuru could not help but feel a chill. Although it's true that she was really interested in Inoue Orihime and had never concealed it. But now that she was looked at with such suspicion and such eyes by everyone, she could not help but feel a burst of panic in her heart. Hearing the explanation of Chizuru, although everyone looked relaxed, there was still some doubt in their eyes. What are you talking about? Why don't you explain? Chizuru. Hearing the inexplicable words of the people here and the strange looks in their eyes, Lilinette looked at Chizuru and asked. Although she had lived for a long time and was very old, she really knew nothing about what the humans in front of her had said before. But if she did not understand, she had to ask. Lilynette knew this truth. Seeing the innocent expression on Lilynette's face, everyone could not help but feel a little more fond of her. Such a cute little girl was really hard to dislike. However, just as everyone's love for Lilynette increased a little, everyone's impression of Chizuru became even worse. They looked at her with even more dissatisfaction, although it was just a guess in their hearts without any basis. I really didn't do anything. Seeing everyone's even more unfriendly eyes, Chizuru wanted to cry but had no tears. Under everyone's suspicious gazes, Chizuru finally explained everything with great difficulty, allowing everyone to believe that she had indeed not done anything that angered the people. However, a child as young as you should still be studying at a young age. Why did you come to such a place alone? Aren't the adults in your family worried? Looking at the little girl in front of him who was about the same age as his two younger sisters, Ichigo couldn't help but speak. Seeing this little girl, he couldn't help but think of his two younger sisters. Hearing Ichigo says little child, Lilynette frowned. It was obvious that she was extremely dissatisfied with being called a child. Seeing Ichigo as if he was a child, the dissatisfaction in Lilynette's heart became more and more. She might look like a little girl, but she was already several hundred years old. Although, in fact, her mental age was indeed just a child, Lilynette would never admit it. Not noticing the frown on Lilynette's face and the slight dissatisfaction in her eyes, Ichigo continued. Also, it's a little inappropriate for a child like you to dress up like this. Looking at the extremely mature clothes on Lilynette, Ichigo furrowed his eyebrows and looked extremely conflicted. It's better for a child to wear normal clothes. You bastard, you dyed your own hair, and yet you still lecturing me. Seeing that Ichigo did not stop talking, Lilynette finally could not help but speak. He did not stop. This kid actually took her seriously, actually dared to criticize her, even Stark would never dare to say this to her. What did you say? This is natural, not dyed. Ichigo was obviously very dissatisfied with the rebuttal from Lilynette and actually spoke about his hair color. Who knows humph? This little girl. Forget it, forget it. Ichigo, don't argue with others. Since when did you care about little girls? Seeing that Ichigo seemed to want to fight with this little girl, Kigo hurriedly pulled Ichigo. Oh, Lilynette, are these your friends? At this time, a charming voice came from the side. Looking in the direction of the voice, Ichigo saw a middle-aged uncle dressed like a western cowboy walking over with a cup of coffee. So cool. Seeing Stark come over with a strange outfit and a cup in his hand, Kigo could not help but say it. It was really that this mature look of adults was too cool, especially in the eyes of boys his age. Walking to the table, Stark casually sat down and put the cup on the table. He held his head with one hand and looked sideways at the children talking to Lilynette in front of him. Stark just sat casually, but the whole person exuded a strange aura, which made people have a strange feeling. Although the person in front of them had a lazy and decadent appearance, all of them could not help but have a good feeling. Are you the parent of this little girl? You have to take care of your own child. Although it was suppressed by the aura of Stark for a moment, Ichigo quickly got rid of the suppression of Stark's aura. Instead, he looked at Stark and said rudely. An irresponsible parent that let his own child become like this and did not discipline it. This is something that Ichigo can't bear. Ichigo's words, Stark's hand shook, and his whole person became stiff. This boy actually said such words. Although this has nothing to do with him, it is difficult to guarantee that Lilynette will not be angry. His eyes glanced quietly at Lilynette. Sure enough, at this time, Lilynette's face was full of displeasure. Although she mainly stared at the yellow-haired kid in front of him, the fierce eyes that looked at him from time to time still made Stark feel a chill. Bang! Lilynette slammed a palm on the table, scaring everyone. After all, everyone was still looking at Stark before, waiting to see how he would reply. No one knew why Lilynette suddenly became angry. You little brat, what are you talking about? Who told you that Stark is my parent? Yellow-haired brat. Hearing the address of Lillinet to himself, the originally calm Ichigo suddenly became angry. He also slammed the table and stood up. Relying on his height advantage, he looked down at Lillinet from above. You bastard! Seeing Ichigo use his height advantage to look down on her, Lillinet only felt a burst of displeasure in his heart. This kid was definitely doing this on purpose, bullying her. Ah, hello. Cute girls. Just as Lillinet was about to explode, a pompous voice suddenly sounded. Then, without anyone noticing, a man with yellow hair appeared in front of them. Before everyone could react, the man had already reached out and grabbed one of Inoue Oriheim's hands. Kneeling on one knee, the man who suddenly appeared looked like a knight. He lifted Inoue Oriheim's hand and placed it in his mouth, and kissed it gently. The whole action looked like flowing water, and it was obvious that he was extremely skilled. You. Looking at the man in front of him, Tatsuki clenched her fists, and his eyes burned with anger. That. It was different from everyone's anger. At this time, Inoue Oriheim had yet to react. Her face was a little red. She looked at the man kneeling on the ground with a shy look. This was the first time she had encountered such a situation. What should she do? Ichigo was still watching from the side. Pa! Hirako Shinji covered his face with a depressed look, and he was actually slapped by the little girl. Ha ha ha. Stupid Shinji, you want to steal someone's girl, but you get slapped instead. Serves you right. A girl in red sportswear stood behind the yellow-haired man. One hand was on her waist, and the other hand was pointing at Hirako Shinji, who was covering her face. She laughed loudly and did not forget to ridicule the man while laughing. Are you happy to see me being beaten in the afterlife? The yellow-haired man who was squatting on the ground turned his head and looked at the girl standing behind him with a bitter face. That I'm sorry. I didn't mean to hit you. I'm so sorry. When Inoue Oriheim woke up from her fantasy and saw that she had slapped him unconsciously, she immediately apologized in a panic. Although that person really took advantage of her, he did not do anything too rude. Moreover, Inoue Oriheim also knew that in some countries in the West, this was just a form of etiquette. It seemed that it was too unreasonable for her to beat him up because of this kind of thing. Oriheim. Seeing Inoue Oriheim actually wanting to apologize, Tatsuki on the side could not stand it anymore. Oriheim was too kind. Even if others did something wrong, she could not bear to blame others. She could only bear it by herself. You don't have to apologize to him, but we should apologize to you. Originally, you came here to play, but you encountered such an accident. I am really sorry. Just as the situation became more and more complicated, a gentle voice suddenly entered everyone's ears. Then they saw another beautiful woman appear in front of them. The person in front of them was very beautiful, but what attracted their attention the most was the pair of eyes. It was a pair of extremely beautiful eyes that flashed with a different kind of brilliance as if they could see through everything. When everyone looked at the woman, they felt as if all their thoughts had been seen through. Looking at the woman in front of them, everyone felt that their hearts suddenly calmed down. Under the gaze of those eyes, it was as if all their thoughts had been seen through, and they could no longer raise any anger. Well, it's nothing. He didn't do it on purpose. Sister, don't say that. Looking at this gentle big sister in front of her, Inoue Oriheim waved her hand repeatedly. In front of this big sister, she felt a sense of intimacy. She couldn't help but want to be closer to her, so she hurriedly waved her hand to refuse her apology. Miss Kusu, you are also here. Oh, it's Chizuru. Then these people are your classmates? Yes, we came here to play. Then you guys have fun. I'm really sorry today. How about this? Your expenses will be mine. No, Miss Harabelle has already said it before. Oh, Harabelle has already said it. Suzuki Kusu nodded slightly, then smiled and looked at Ichigo, who was protecting them. Since today is Haribel's treat, then how about this? In the future, when you come here to spend money, I will give you a 20% discount. Are you sure? Chizuru was obviously a little tempted, but she was still a little hesitant. Don't mind it. Just treat it as me making friends with you. Thank you very much, Miss Kusu. You're welcome. After dealing with these people, Suzuki Kusu looked at Hirako Shinji, who had already stood up, and Hiyori. Looking at Hirako Shinji with a sad face, Suzuki Kusu really did not know how to talk about him. After all, he was also her senior. When she first joined the 10th Division, Hirako Shinji was still the vice-captain. There was a trace of helplessness in her eyes. In the end, Suzuki Kusu could only change the topic. By the way, didn't you and Shinji go out to play? TSK, I get angry when I think about it. Shinji, this bastard. Hearing Suzuki Kusu asks about this matter, Hiyori's face immediately became unpleasant. Forget it, he'll go to the back to see Lisa and the others. He'll leave the matters outside to you, Kusu. After saying that, Hiyori did not say anything else. She just turned around and walked back. It was obvious that the two of them had encountered something unpleasant when they went out. At the very least, for Hiyori. Really? Shaking his head helplessly, Suzuki Kusu said a few words to Ichigo and the others. Then, she turned and walked towards the counter. It was really annoying to deal with the messy things between them every day. I don't think I have introduced myself yet. Without any restraint, he pulled over a chair and sat on Ichigo. However, Hirako Shinji was obviously not easily defeated. He placed the chair next to Inoue Orihime and then shamelessly sat down in front of Chizura's fierce eyes. What a strange person, strange hairstyle, strange behavior, strange clothing, strange way of speaking. Everyone looked at Hirako Shinji and only felt that this person was extremely strange from beginning to end, making people feel extremely strange. My name is Hirako Shinji. Looking at the hand that Hirako Shinji stretched out in front of him, Inoue Orihime hesitated for a while and finally shook hands with him with a little bit of caution. There is also this strange self-introduction. After listening to Hirako Shinji's strange self-introduction, the strange feeling in everyone's heart added another part. Of course, Lillinette and Stark did not even bat an eye for Hirako Shinji's behavior. They have long been used to it. However, although he is a very strange person, there is a strange charm. After a while, everyone has cleared the gap and became familiar with Hirako Shinji. Goodbye, Orihime, Tatsuki, Chizuru. Standing at the entrance of the coffee shop, Hirako Shinji waved to the group of people who had left far away with a bright smile on his face. Goodbye, Shinji-san. Inoue Orihime turned her head and waved to Hirako Shinji happily. She smiled very happily. Obviously, today's experience made her very happy. Seeing their group gradually disappear into the distance, Hirako Shinji put down his waving hand, the smile on his face gradually faded, and his eyes revealed a little unknown meaning. Goodbye, Kurosaki Ichigo. Turning back to the store, Hirako Shinji took a cup of coffee from the counter, walked to the seat on the side and sat down. After taking a sip, he put the cup on the table. Hirako Shinji fell back and lay down in a comfortable position. Kimura, is that guy? The person opposite Hirako Shinji put down the book in his hand, revealing his mature face. 100 years of time did not make Muyang's figure and appearance change much. If one had to say, the temperament he gave off was more mature than 100 years ago. He closed the book in his hand and gently placed it on the table. Muyang picked up the cup on the table. His face was calm and no emotion could be seen. Only the flash of light in his eyes showed the uneasiness in his heart. The time is finally coming. Instead of answering Hirako Shinji's question, Muyang said something unrelated, and his tone seemed to be a little emotional. Although Muyang did not answer directly, Hirako Shinji already knew what he meant. Can that little fellow really do it? Although he understood what Muyang said, Hirako Shinji still could not help but be a little doubtful. That Kurosaki Ichigo, although there is a strong spirit power hidden in his body, but that is not enough. Hee. Muyang only laughed softly. He did not have the slightest intention of answering. This made Hirako Shinji, who was opposite him, feel helpless. That guy Kimura was getting more and more fond of keeping people in suspense. It was always like this. Just wait and see. The prelude is about to start. I wonder if this play is the same as what I thought. Forget it, I don't know what you and Kisuke are thinking. Hirako Shinji had his hands behind his head and was lying there looking at the ceiling, as if there was something good there. Anyway, I just want to know that our chance of revenge is coming soon. After waiting for such a long time, I can finally find Aizen to settle the accounts for so many years. Shinji. Seeing that Hirako Shinji was thinking of those things, his mood seemed to fluctuate a lot. Muyang called him softly and woke him up from those bad memories. Looking at this old friend in front of him, Muyang softly comforted him, it is only a few months' time. Now, you just have to relax and wait slowly. The time is not yet here. I know. Hirako Shinji waved his hand and looked at Muyang impatiently. Do you think I am that kind of impulsive little child? Anyway, such a long time has passed. I can still endure it for a few months. Then I am relieved. TSK. Hirako Shinji curled his lips unhappily. He was actually worried. Although the other party was his former superior, he was also his friend. This feeling was really uncomfortable. However, at this time, we should also make some preparations. Muyang pondered for a while, then looked up and beckoned to Ashoda Hachijin, who had been sitting in a corner, and at the same time called Suzuki Kusu, who was sitting at the counter and did not know what to talk to Haribel. Make some preparations. Hirako Shinji sat up from the sofa and squeezed inside, leaving a large place for Ashoda Hachijin, and then looked at Muyang and said, what preparations do you need to make? Also, don't call them all over. There's no need. Muyang looked at Suzuki Kusu, who was sitting next to him, and asked, Kusu, are you ready? Yes. Suzuki Kusu sat there quietly. She looked much more mature than before. If she was a girl 100 years ago, she was definitely a standard mature woman now. Whether it was her appearance, dress, or the temperament she had. I have already set up the track thread in the entire Karakura town. The Karakura town is within my scope of investigation. No matter who it is, as long as they appear in the Karakura town, they will not be able to escape my detection. That's good. Muyang nodded, although the possibility of using the Karakura town as the main battlefield is very small, we have to be on guard. Moreover, this is our base camp, so we have to prepare safety measures. However, Kusu, you don't have to be too tired. We are still in a safe period, so you don't have to explore all day. Anyway, there is still the blessing to help them. You can take action when necessary. I know. Seeing the concern in Muyang's eyes, Suzuki Kusu showed a trace of tenderness in her eyes. She nodded and said with a smile, her smile like a flower. I can't stand it. Seeing the performance of the two people opposite him, Hirako Shinji turned his head with his mouth curled and looked disgusted. Kimura, what am I going to do? Ashoda Hachijin opened his mouth and asked, if it is just surveillance, with the double insurance of Kisuke and Suzuki Kusu, it is enough, and there is no need for him to come over to discuss. You also have an important task. Muyang turned to look at Ashoda Hachijin, then looked at Hirako Shinji. What are you looking at me for? Seeing Muyang staring at himself, Hirako Shinji asked strangely. Hirako Shinji, what do you think of Aizen? Aizen. Hirako Shinji body paused, and there was a deep-rooted hatred in his eyes. It was true that several of them were framed by Aizen, and now they have fallen to such a point, Hirako Shinji hated Aizen the most. Struggling to restrain the anger and hatred in his heart, Hirako Shinji knew that it was not the time. As long as he waited for a few months, it would be the time for him and Aizen to settle the old debts of adulthood. Aizen, he is an ambitious guy. I knew it from the first day he joined Godai 13. That guy is definitely a dangerous person. Under his good appearance, there is a deep evil hidden, so I chose him as my vice-captain at the beginning, just to monitor him. I did not expect. Speaking of these adult old things, Hirako Shinji could not help but feel a hatred in his heart again. It was because of this that he and his companions hid like this. What about his strength? What do you think? What level do you think his strength has reached? Strength? Hirako Shinji was slightly stunned, and then he recalled the few memories about Aizen's strength in his brain. His Kaika Suigetsu is too dangerous, completely hypnotizing and manipulating the five senses. Such an ability is still terrible, but as long as we does not give him the chance to activate the ability. If we exclude his Zanpakuto ability, in terms of combat ability, his strength is only the level of captain. Compared to his combat ability, I pay more attention to his schemes, which is the most terrible thing about him. You are wrong. Hearing Hirako Shinji's evaluation of Aizen, Muyang shook his head slightly. Sure enough, he still did not look at Aizen's real combat level. It is no wonder that Aizen's ability and strategy completely covered up his other aspects of strength. Everyone only noticed his scheme, but they did not pay enough attention to his strength. What? Seeing the expression on Hirako Shinji's face, Muyang explained. You may have passed out at the time, so you didn't notice that on the night 100 years ago, Aizen easily blocked Heido No. 88 Hyori Gekizoku Shinten Rei issued by Grand Kid Chief Tsukabashi Tessai using his Heido No. 81 Dank. What? Hirako Shinji and Ashoda Hachijin both showed a shocked look on their faces. They had not heard of this news before. At this time, they were shocked when they heard such news. It was the number 88 had. Even the captain could not easily block it. That was his strength 100 years ago. At that time, his strength was no less than the captain, and he even won a little. And I also had a short fight with him that day. Although both sides did not use their full power, I dare to say that Aizen's strength is not what you think. At that time, Aizen's strength is no longer inferior to yours. This is still without calculating his Kaika Suigetsu ability. Hearing Muyang's words, Hirako Shinji pondered and said nothing. According to Muyang, Aizen's strength was stronger than them 100 years ago. With his talent, no one knows what level his strength has reached now. If they really deal with him with the previous mentality, the final result is really not optimistic. So you want to? Hirako Shinji looked at Muyang and waited for his answer. Hearing Hirako Shinji's question, Muyang smiled. The next period of time cannot be as relaxed as now. It has been 100 years of actual combat. Seeing the smile on the corner of Muyang's mouth, Hirako Shinji looked bitter. This is really troublesome. However, my body is indeed stiff. I really can't go on like this. I really can't help it. Next, he'll have to experience the feeling of fighting for a long time. I'm going to trouble you, Ashoda. The tasks for the next period of time may be very tiring. After all, it is not a simple matter to completely isolate the fluctuations caused by the captain-level battle. It's nothing. There is a simple and honest expression on Ashoda Hachijin's face. Just as I need some exercise, listening to you, I am afraid it is not good to exercise. Well, that is it, from tomorrow on, everyone will be busy. Well, although it is not very clear what you are talking about, you seem to be planning something, and it seems to be very troublesome. Stark did not know when he had taken off the hat on his head. At this time, he was rubbing his head and making a mess of his originally neat hair. Slowly walking over, Stark had a helpless smile on his face. Although your things sound very troublesome, and I hate troublesome things the most. But since this is your business, Kimura, I think I still have to help. Oh. Hirako Shinji looked at Stark in surprise. The lazy Stark will take the initiative to help. It's really unusual. Well, you are not qualified to say that to others. It is something that can't be helped. Although I am afraid of trouble and don't like things like fighting, but it also depends on the situation. If it is Kimura's matter, even if you feel troubled, you still have to bite the bullet. But what I care more is that Aizen is really as powerful as Kimura, you say. Muyang smiled and said to her, in any case, if you were at your level, you would just be delivering food. You would probably be killed in an instant. You. Hearing Muyang's answer, Hyora's face changed. She shouted and rushed forward to teach Muyang a lesson. Wait. Hiyori. Hirako Shinji quickly hugged Rishi and did not let her rush forward. Let me go, you bald man. Being hugged by Hirako Shinji, Hiyori could only bare her teeth at Muyang, which could be considered to vent the dissatisfaction in her heart. Lord Kimura, what can I help you with? Hearing the discussion here, Harabel came over and said respectfully to Muyang. Her tone was as respectful as ever, just like when they first met 100 years ago. Harabel, this is our battle. It is a battle that has nothing to do with you. You don't need to be involved. Muyang looked at Harabel and shook his head. This battle was between himself, Kisuke, and everyone in the Visored Legion in Aizen. This battle had nothing to do with Harabel and the others. They had no need to be involved in this battle. But Stark. There is no need for Stark to participate. Muyang interrupted Harabel's words. Not to mention that they have no reason to fight, let's say Aizen. In the absence of Stark and Harabel, I don't know how his espada can go. They should be enough to deal with them. There is no need to let Stark and Harabel fight. You don't like fighting. Although you're strong, you have an inherent rejection of fighting. A peaceful and stable life is what you like. There is no need to force yourself to participate in unnecessary battles. But. Harabel hesitated. But. Although you do not need to participate in the battle, I still have something to ask of you. Please tell me. Hearing Muyang's words, Harabel said without hesitation. I may have to trouble you and Stark to help us cultivate during this period of time. After all, it has been hundreds of years away from actual combat. If you want to recover your combat effectiveness, there is nothing better than fighting a strong opponent. Understood. Harabel nodded and said nothing more, but the expression on her face showed her will. That's good. Get ready to close the shop. Muyang picked up the cup on the table, raised his head and drank it all. Then he stood up and said to Harabel. I knew it. Hirako Shinji slapped his forehead with a bitter look, and his face was full of helplessness. It is really in line with Kimura's style of doing things. He is always so swift and decisive. Hirako Shinji's bitter face was different. The moment others heard Muyang's words, they already understood his plan. Just as Muyang finished his words, everyone was ready. And the other three people had already cleaned up the shop outside. At this time, the door was closed. Let's go, Baldy Shinji. Everyone dashed into the small courtyard behind them. When they saw Hirako Shinji, who was still holding his forehead and sighing bitterly, Hiyori slapped him on the face without any politeness, leaving a big slap mark on his face. Then, regardless of the two streams of blood flowing out of Hirako Shinji's nose, she grabbed his collar and pulled him to the backyard. Let me go, Hiyori, you musclehead. Being pulled by the collar of Hiyori, Hirako Shinji shouted with dissatisfaction, but it did not work at all. Hiyori pulled Hirako Shinji's collar as if she did not hear it, and walked back without caring about the dissatisfaction of Hirako Shinji. The door of the backyard was suddenly pushed open. The people who had been doing their own things over there had all stood up at some point. The lazy aura on their bodies was swept away, and they were all rubbing their hands. All of them were full of energy. Looking at everyone, Muyang's mouth was slightly raised, and he looked at the people standing there. It seems that everyone is ready. Of course, we have never forgotten what happened in the past. I remember it clearly in my mind. We are going to face a war. How can we continue to be indifferent? I am waiting to see Aizen again and send him a big gift. Seeing the undisguised hatred on the faces of the few companions present, Muyang's eyes were also a little heavy. The damage that Aizen caused them could only be washed away through his blood. A few months is enough. Let's prepare a big gift for Aizen. Of course, the reward is his life. Kusu, Ashoda. I know. Ashoda Hachijin responded softly, then put his hands together, a yellow thin wall opened from his palm, and then suddenly expanded, covering the whole coffee shop. With a dark light flashing, the whole coffee shop became looming. Although there was no change over there, people who walked outside would unconsciously ignore the place. Suzuki Kusu stretched out her hand and clenched it. It was as if she had grabbed something in the void. With the entire coffee shop as the center, invisible threads spread out and hid in the void. They could not be touched or sensed. Muyang looked at Suzuki Kusu. After getting her answer, he turned to nod at Ashoda. The latter walked to an inconspicuous place in the backyard and squatted down. He reached out to touch the ground and grabbed a place. He suddenly pulled. As Ashoda pulled, something on the ground was pulled open, revealing a bottomless hole hidden below. There were neat stairs at the entrance of the hole. Although the hole was hidden very well, the stairs leading to the bottom were repaired very generously. Let's go. Speaking of which, I haven't gone down for a long time. When he saw the hole below, he took the lead and walked down the stairs. As he stepped into the ground, the lights on both sides of the stairs lit up, illuminating the stairs very brightly. Kimura, you're really something. It's just a staircase down, but it's actually built so beautifully. Walking on the stairs, Hirako Shinji looked at the neatly built stairs and could not help but twitch his mouth and complain. No, I think the stairs are very beautiful. Kuna Mashiro slowly followed the crowd and reached out her hand to feel the things on both sides of the road curiously. She looked like a curious baby. Hearing Hirako Shinji's words, Kuna Mashiro looked away from the corridor on both sides and looked at Hirako Shinji. You didn't come down to repair yourself at that time, so of course you said that. At that time, we took a long time to fix it. Looking at the innocent face of Kuna Mashiro, Hirako Shinji really did not know what to say to her. At that time, she did not do anything, and now she was still here to make sarcastic remarks. However, she still had a pure and innocent look on her face. He really did not know how to say that she was good. In the midst of teasing and playing, everyone had already finished the flight of stairs and arrived at the training ground located underground. Ashoda, set up 10 strong barriers first, and isolate all the spiritual energy fluctuations here. Yes. Hearing Muyang's words, Ashoda Hachijin directly clasped his hands together, and then several bright yellow enchantments spread from his palm and wrapped the entire underground training ground. Hey, although it is really troublesome to say something about fighting, but it is still necessary to come. Seeing the several barriers set up, Stark helplessly said with one hand holding his head, and his tone is a bit lazy, like he has not woken up. Stark. What are you talking about? Hearing Stark's weak voice, Lillinette jumped up and shouted. It is a very troublesome thing. As if he did not hear what Lillinette said, Stark was still lazy. Although I have decided to work hard, I still can't raise a little enthusiasm. Stark thought of this in his heart, and then reached out his fingers to dig his ears. Just as Stark put on such a listless look, Lily on the side finally couldn't help it. She jumped up and slapped on Stark's head, and then Stark's little finger, which was originally pulling his ear, suddenly poked into the ear. Ah! It hurts. Lily, do you want to kill me? Stark pulled out his little finger and rubbed his ears hard. The feeling of being suddenly poked into his ears like that was really too uncomfortable. It was as if his ears were going to be broken. Stark was very suspicious. Had his eardrums been broken? Humph. Flicking her head proudly, Lillinette did not have any regret for what she had done. Who told you to be so lazy? It is obviously such an important moment, but you have not done it properly. Serves you right. When he heard the words of Lilynette, Stark smiled helplessly. What else could he say? After all, it seemed that she was reasonable anyway. Moreover, even if she was the unreasonable party, he still should not say anything. Women. They are unreasonable. A thought suddenly flashed through Stark's mind, and then he endured the emotions in his heart. His expression became a little solemn. He looked at Muyang and asked, "Well, Kimura, you should already have a detailed plan, right? Tell me what you think and how you should make everyone fully exercise." Plan. I haven't thought about it yet. Hearing Muyang's words, everyone fainted. They didn't even have a plan and let everyone come down just like that. What the hell was this? Ignoring everyone's behavior, Muyang stretched out his hand and took out his Zanpakuto from somewhere. He grabbed his Zanpakuto and gently pushed his finger on the hilt of his saber. A cold light flashed. However, I think that a chaotic battle might be a good idea. Before he finished speaking, Muyang waved his right hand, and a cold light flashed. His Zanpakuto had been unsheathed at some point in time, and the blade flickered with a faint cold light. The blade light actually enveloped all the people in front of him. Damn it, Kimura, do you want to challenge us all by yourself? Seeing Muyang unsheathing his sword, Hirako Shinji was shocked. Then, he noticed that Muyang's blade light had actually enveloped all of them. He immediately said in surprise. I've been underestimated. Love said, but his movements were not slow at all. Before he could pull out Zanpakuto, Love moved his body and blocked his Zanpakuto with his sword and scabbard in front of him, blocking Muyang's attack. This won't do. Kimura, although you are very strong, you are still too proud to want a 1v3. By the time Kimura Muyang's offensive was blocked by Hirako Shinji and Love Aikawa, Rose had a Shuanpa coming behind Kimura Muyang, and said softly in his mouth that Zanpakuto in his hand was relentlessly chopping off Kimura Muyang's shoulder. It's you who is proud, Rose. Feeling the attack behind him, Muyang said without turning his head. A light flashed on his left hand. Then, Muyang turned his arm and blocked Rose's attack with his left hand. What? Seeing that Muyang actually blocked Rose's attack with his bare hands, the three people around were all shocked. This was a strike of the captain level. Although Rose definitely did not use his full strength, he should not be blocked with his bare hands. The left hand blocked Rose's slash, and Kimura Muyang right hand Zanpakuto didn't pause at all, still tracing the track slashing towards Hirako Shinji in front of him. Bang! After forcing Shinji and Aikawa back with one slash, Muyang slightly exerted force with his left hand and threw Rose along with Zanpakuto in his hand. Rose moved a few steps and removed the force from his body. Shinji and Love surrounded Muyang. In an instant, the three of them were forced back. Muyang did not have the slightest intention of attacking. Instead, he stood there and looked at the three of them calmly. The Zanpakuto in his hand hung down slightly, but he maintained the state of being ready to attack at any time. Rose, you have been away from actual combat for nearly 100 years. Don't tell me that you have already weakened to this extent. Not only has your strength decreased a lot, but even your basic judgment ability has also decreased. What kind of damage do you think a strike of that level can cause me? As expected of Kimura. Love secretly clenched his fists. He had blocked Muyang's attack in a hurry just now. Although he did block it, the force of the recoil still made his palm slightly numb. It was really a terrifying power. It seems that I can't do it without showing some real skills. Hirako Shinji curled his lips and said. Then the three people put their hands on their faces at the same time. A depressing Ryuryoku suddenly emitted from the three of them. Schwa. He suddenly waved his hand, and three masks with different styles suddenly appeared on their faces. The moment the masks appeared, a powerful Ryuryoku suddenly burst out from the three people. It was another kind of powerful Ryuryoku that was completely different from Shinigami's Ryuryoku. Is it holification? Muyang looked at the three people in front of him who were wearing masks and Ryuryoku's explosive growth. He whispered, and the smile on his face became more and more brilliant. This was more interesting. Feeling his blood gradually boiling and his body trembling slightly because he felt them, the corners of Muyang's mouth outlined an ambiguous smile. He really didn't expect that he was also a person who desired to fight. Muyang's body swayed, and in an instant, three Muyang seemed to appear. He held Zanpakuto in his hand and charged towards Hirako Shinji, Kawa Love, and Torabashi RJR. Is this an illusion? Is it a trick to play with the vision? Seeing Muyang rushing towards the three of them at the same time, Hirako Shinji whispered, but there was a trace of surprise in his heart. According to his understanding of Muyang, he was not a person who would do these little tricks. Dang 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 dang. Three sounds of swords clashing rang out at the same time. The faces of Shinji and the other two, who were originally puzzled, changed. Three figures and three attacks were actually solid. How is this possible? After blocking Muyang's attack, Shinji took a few steps back and looked at Muyang. He cried out involuntarily. Although he had a mask on his face, it was still unable to hide his shock. What? Is it hard that to understand? Seeing that the three of them seemed to be puzzled, Muyang also stopped what he was doing and looked at the three of them. This was just a spar. Perhaps it was more appropriate to call it training. There was no need to fight desperately. After all, it was a battle for cultivation. As you can see, I did not release Zanpakuto. The attack just now was not my special ability. Then how halfway through his words, Hirako Shinji suddenly stopped and looked at Muyang with some disbelief in his eyes. Is it because of the visual illusion that we created because of the speed? When he said that, even Hirako Shinji himself was baffled. It should be known that the three of them were at captain-level combat strength, and they were people who had been promoted to captain 100 years ago. Even if they had not experienced the battle for 100 years and their strength had declined, Muyang was also the same. He had not experienced the battle for nearly 100 years. Moreover, although they did not unleash their Zanpakuto, they had already used holification. This kind of ability they had obtained in the past 100 years. It should be known that the Ryuryoku after the holification was several times stronger than before. In terms of the amplification of Ryuryoku, it was even more than Shirkai. But even with such strength, they could not keep up with Muyang's speed. No. That was not the level of being unable to keep up, but the speed was far inferior to Muyang, at least in the instant of the speed burst. Shinji, you are still as sharp as ever. Muyang praised Shinji, obviously admitting what he had just said. Hearing Muyang admit it, the expressions of the three people on the other side instantly became a bit serious. The difference in strength was actually so great. Although I knew that you were very strong, I never had the chance to fight you. I really didn't expect that your strength was actually so strong. Ikawa Love looked at Muyang and said in a deep voice. Even if the other party was his friend, such a big difference in strength still made Ikawa Love unable to feel relieved. If the first time was because he was not ready, then the blow just now was not the least bit fake. Feeling the numbness from his palm, Ikawa Love's face became a bit more serious. He was actually at a disadvantage in the power he was best at. Crush down, Tengamaru. Ikawa Love waved his hand, and the Zanpakuto in his hand had turned into a huge mace. Just looking at his huge body made people tremble in their hearts. That size, if it were to hit you, it would definitely be painful. He casually waved his hand, bringing up bursts of whistling wind. The incomparably huge Zanpakuto was actually as light as a feather in the hands of Love. Getting serious now? Feeling the rise of Ryuryoku from Love, and the howling wind from his Tengamaru, Rose, who was at the side, had a smile on his face. Although his face was covered by mask, he could still easily feel the smile in his voice. I can't let you perform alone. This is not in line with my artistic nature at all. Play, Kinshura. With a few notes beating, the zanpakuto in Rose's hand shook and turned into a golden whip. Shinji, don't you want to release your zanpakuto? Muyang looked at Hirako Shinji and asked. Rose and Love both have released their zanpakuto. Forget about me. My ability is not suitable for group battles. Hearing Hirako Shinji's answer, Muyang suddenly understood. He forgot about the special ability of Hirako Shinji. His zanpakuto's ability was really not suitable for group combat. As he spoke softly, Kinshira, who was in Rose's hand, had already turned into a golden bolt of lightning and quickly struck towards Muyang. Dang! Muyang waved his hand, and the zanpakuto in his hand easily struck the top of Rose's golden whip, blocking his attack. Rose, you! Just as Muyang was about to say something, Rose, who had been knocked away by him, suddenly turned into a snake. The moment he fell, he suddenly changed direction and followed Muyang's trajectory. Shit! Seeing the action of Rose's zanpakuto, Muyang, who was familiar with his ability, suddenly cried in his heart. That guy's ability was very strange. If he was entangled. Sure enough, just as these thoughts flashed through Muyang's mind, before he could make the next move, Rose in the distance had already started his next move. With one hand holding the handle of his own sword, the other hand gently flicked on it, and with a strange music, a strange force passed along his sword to Muyang's sword. Muyang tightened his hand, and a light green light flashed on his zanpakuto's surface. The next moment, the explosion caused by Luozi's attack had drowned him. Muyang and the others were in full swing, and the others did not fall down. The figure flashed, and in the daytime, they had pulled Suzuki Kusu and Yadamaru Lisa to fight against the lazy Stark. As for Lilynette on the side, she was obviously ignored by them. Oh, it's actually the three of you who came to me. This is not good, do you really have to do such a troublesome thing? Stark. What are you talking about? Haven't you decided to help yourself? How come it suddenly became boring at this time? Get up for me, bastard. Hearing Stark's discouraged words, Lily on the side jumped up and shouted with dissatisfaction. Obviously, she was very dissatisfied with Stark's indifferent attitude. I know. Stark agreed, but even Hiyori on the opposite side could clearly hear the perfunctory meaning in his words, not to mention Lilynette who got along with him day and night. Hey! Stark, don't underestimate us too much. Lily had not opened her mouth yet. In the opposite world, she could not help but shout. The casual attitude of Stark in front of her was simply contempt for the three people on her side. Stark did not respond to Hiyori's words, but Lilynette unable to bear standing on the side refuted. As the two Tsunderas lowly in the store, the two of them have not dealt with it for a long time. Che. Regarding Lilynette's words, Hiyori just didn't overdo it and didn't say much, but anyone could easily feel her contempt. Obviously she didn't take seriously about Lilynette's words. Stark is strong and they can clearly feel it. The level of Ryuryoku, the oppression, all clearly told them that the Stark who is usually lazy, is definitely a strong guy. As for Lily. TCH, if she really wanted to evaluate her strength, then it would be the level of trash, not even comparable to an ordinary Minos Grande. Ah! You actually dare to look down on me. Feeling the thick disdain in the movements of Hiyori, Lilynette was instantly enraged. That girl actually looked down on her like this. A bright light flashed on the horn on her head. Then, Lilynette reached out and pulled out a strangely shaped knife. With the knife in hand, she held her sword in her hand and looked at Hiyori, her eyes full of evil smiles. Hey! Hiyori, later I will let you feel what is called hell and despair. Completely ignoring the threat of Lilynette, Hiyori looked at Stark standing there, and then suddenly pulled out her own sword from behind, and her sword was pointed to Stark. Hurry up and pull out your sword, Stark, otherwise I will think you are looking down on us. Correct. Holding his own sword in her hand, put it flat in front of her chest, Lisa's momentum gradually gathered, ready to pull sword out of the sheath at any time. Suzuki Kusu did not speak, just gently put his hand on her own sword. There is really no way. Stark rubbed his head and his tone seemed very distressed. Sure enough, this kind of thing is really too troublesome. It would be good if I continued to sleep today. However, since I promised Kimura, it is better to be a little more serious. Although his mouth has been complaining, Stark still did not continue to play around, but took out his own sword, and then slowly pulled it out of the scabbard. It has begun. With a light shout, sword instantly unsheathed in Lisa's hand, a flash of bright blade light flashed over, Lisa's blade light has split into Stark's eyes. Stark lifted his arm and easily blocked Lisa's slash. Just as his sword blocked Lisa's slash, Hiyori had already waved the sword in his hand and came to Stark. In front of, taking advantage of the gap between Stark blocking Lisa and cutting it down, the time is just right, no gap. Just as the sword in Hiyori's hand was about to cut him, Stark slightly exerted force on his hand and forced Lisa back, and then the speed of his arm waved instantly increased, and his sword clashed with Hiyori's, making her sword deviate from the original track. What? Seeing Stark's action at this moment, Lisa and Hiyori were both shocked. They actually completed such a series of movements in an instant, and the speed of that instantaneous burst is really not to be underestimated. This Stark is really strong, far beyond their original guess. Just as the two of them were secretly shocked by the strength of Stark, a dazzling knife light suddenly bloomed from behind Stark and accurately stabbed to Stark's back. At this time, it was the time when Stark just finished an attack and his whole body was relaxed. Although the attack angle was extremely tricky, Stark seemed to have eyes on his back. His body turned and avoided the light. At the same time, sword in his hand waved upward and cut the person behind. Kusu. Seeing that Stark cleverly avoided Suzuki Kusu's slash, at the same time, he also made a counterattack and slashed toward Suzuki Kusu. Although he knew that this was just training, Stark would definitely not seriously slash her, but Hiyori and Lisa still could not help but let out a cry of surprise. In the worry of Hiyori and Lisa, Suzuki Kusu's body turned in the air and avoided Stark's slash in a very clever manner. At the same time, one of her palms had been aimed at Stark's chest. Heido number 33, Skasui. A blue flame erupted from Suzuki Kusu's palm and hit Stark's chest, and within the distance of less than 20 centimeters, Stark obviously had no room to avoid. Bang! Suzuki Kusu's attack hit Stark, but she did not pursue the victory. Instead, she immediately retreated a few steps and quickly pulled away from Stark. She knew that the attack just now would not cause any damage to Stark. If the opponent is someone of this level, it is better to keep a good distance. Well done. Kusu. Quickly meeting up with Suzuki Kusu, the three stood together and looked at the place where Stark stood. They all knew that the level of power just now was difficult to even cause a little interference for Stark, let alone cause any big damage. The opponent is so powerful, it is better to gather together and not give the enemy a chance to recover. You are really powerful. The smoke dispersed, revealing the almost unscathed Stark. Looking at the three people in front of him, Stark said. In a moment of carelessness, he actually suffered a small loss. He really can't look down on anyone, especially Suzuki Kusu. The attack just now, the timing was really excellent. You. Looking at the four people who had already fought together, Lillinette stamped her feet with dissatisfaction and then looked at the last battleground. Compared to the previous two battles, perhaps the last one was more worthy of the word chaos. With a strong military aura, Kensei held his sword, which was closer to a dagger than a sword, in one hand and clenched his other hand into a fist. At this time, he was fighting with Haribel in close combat. Haribel held her hollowed-out short sword in one hand and fought with Kensei with some difficulty. She was not very good at close combat, but she met Kensei who was good at close combat. She only felt that she was suppressed everywhere, and she could not fully display her strength. Lord Haribel. Seeing Haribel struggling to fight, the three people on the side suddenly became anxious. They stepped on the ground and suddenly rushed up, wanting to stop Kensei for Haribel so that she could turn the situation around. Get down. Seeing that Sun and the other two did not care about their own existence and directly wanted to support Haribel, Kuna Mashiro on the side was dissatisfied on the spot. Mashiro kick. Kuna Mashiro suddenly jumped out from the side and kicked at Sun. Bang! With a loud sound, Sun, who were rushing forward, were all kicked down by Mashiro, and their bodies flew back uncontrollably, and then slammed into the ground, raising a large cloud of dust on the ground. Damn, you crazy girl! She got up from the ground and patted off the dust on her body. She looked at Kuna Mashiro, who was in a victorious position in the air, with dissatisfaction. It was just training, but this crazy girl actually had so much strength. The nearby Mila Rose, who had just stood up, was also very unhappy. She had been hit by the attack just now and suffered a lot of damage. Now she still felt that her arm was hurting faintly. It's really uncomfortable to be in such a sorry state. Sun stood up from the ground and glanced at the dust left on her body. Her tone also carried a trace of anger. Since she came to the modern realm with Lord Kimura, this was the first time she had been in such a sorry state. Are the three of you okay? Standing on one side, there was a flash of light at the feet of Ashoda Hachijin. Appearing in front of the three of them, and then a bright yellow light flashed on their hands. The three of them immediately felt that the injuries they had just suffered were a little better. Thank you, Ashoda. Looking at Ashoda Hachijin standing on one side, Sun softly thanked him. No need to be polite, the strength I have mastered is not good at using it in combat, generally speaking, it is used in auxiliary aspects. Now I will look at it and treat you. But it is not necessary this time. Anyway, as long as you use that, all the injuries will be recovered instantly. Yes. The three of them looked at each other and immediately understood each other's thoughts. Strangle to death, Anaconda. Devour, Leona. Thrust, Sierva. As a cloud of smoke rose into the air, Ryuryoku instantly exploded, and the originally slightly hurt Mila Rose and Sun immediately recovered. They were even more spirited than before. Oh. Kuna Mashiro, who was originally in a victorious position in the air, was immediately attracted by the movement below. Seeing that the three people below and Ryuryoku had all changed greatly, Kuna Mashiro's eyes suddenly lit up with joy. Have you all released your Zanpakuto? Then I want to. Schwa. Kuna Mashiro waved her hand in front of her and a mask with a peach heart in the middle suddenly appeared on her face. The moment the mask appeared, Ryuryoku on Kuna Mashiro suddenly became a lot stronger, hers was much stronger than the three people under Resurrection. Mashiro. Super kick. After the holification was completed, Kuna Mashiro looked at the three people below, and her body jumped, and then her feet suddenly kicked in the air. With a terrible sound of air explosion, Kuna Mashiro figure turned into an orange lightning bolt and rushed toward the three people below. Her stretched out right foot with a terrible momentum and kicked the head of Mila Rose who stood at the front. Kuna Mashiro's attack was extremely fast, and before the three of them could react, Kuna Mashiro's kick had already arrived. The three of them did not have time to react. No one had expected that Mashiro's attack would come so quickly, and her head was about to be kicked by her. Pop. Just as Mashiro's kick was about to kick Mila Rose's head, a yellow thick wall suddenly appeared in front of her head, and Mashiro's kick also kicked the yellow thick wall that suddenly appeared. Seeing a crystal wall suddenly appear in front of him to block the foot of Kuna Mashiro, Apache's eyes flashed a trace of relief. Just a moment ago, she really did not have any reaction, if not for the crystal wall that appeared in time, she did not know what to do. Thank you. She said to Ashoda Hachijin on the side. Apache had no time to wait for Ashita Hachijin's answer, and Sun and Mila Rose, who had the same fear on the side, quickly left their original positions. Ka. With two voices, the yellow crystal wall in front of Apache shattered after blocking Mashiro's kick. Ah! Ashoda, you actually helped them deal with me. Looking at Ashoda Hachijin standing there, Kuna Mashiro shouted with dissatisfaction. Your attack is too fierce, it is just training. What? It's the only thing I have. But. There is no but, Ashoda, you bully me. Ah. Looking at Kuna Mashiro standing in front of him jumping up and down, there is a little sense of helplessness in Ashoda Hachijin. For the person in front of him, he really does not know how to deal with it. He has been bullied for the past 100 years. Forget it, Ashoda, you stay here. When Ashoda Hachijin felt helpless, Kuna Mashiro, who was originally acting like a spoiled child, suddenly opened her mouth and said something, which made Ashoda Hachijin, who was originally distressed, suddenly stunned. Not giving Ashoda Hachijin time to react, Kuna Mashiro stepped on the ground, and her body had risen up and rushed to the three people who had gathered together again. You crazy girl! Seeing Kuna Mashiro rush up, the faces of the three people on the other side were ugly. The most annoying person was this kind of person. Should they say that she was innocent or that she was stupid? It was just a training, but this crazy girl actually used so much strength, and every attack was so fierce, which made the three of them very unhappy. Apache clenched her right fist and suddenly struck forward. A red balla suddenly shot out from her hand, and after shooting out, there was a sound of explosion. It was obvious that the speed of the attack just now had far exceeded the speed of sound. Hey! Although the speed of the balla was terrifying, Kuna Mashiro reaction speed was definitely not slow. Just as she stood still, she felt the attack that broke through the air. Kuna Mashiro left foot swung in the air and casually smashed the balla. Are you ready? Incoming. After greeting the three people in front of him, Kuna Mashiro stepped on the ground and suddenly rushed out. Her attack was as fierce as ever, except when she greeted the three of them at the beginning. Bang! Just as Kuna Mashiro was about to rush out, a figure suddenly rushed from the other side and hit Kuna Mashiro, who was about to rush out. Ah! After being suddenly hit, Kuna Mashiro's momentum immediately stopped and turned to look at the person who hit her. Lord Harabel. Kuna Mashiro had not spoken yet, and the other side had already called out the identity of the person. It was Harabel who fought with Kensei. Seeing who it was, Kuna Mashiro looked up at Kensei who was standing there, and it was Kensei who had gained the upper hand in the confrontation just now. Kensei, you big fool, you actually hit a girl so hard. Kuna Mashiro looked at Kensei who was standing in the air and said with a tone full of contempt. This is just training, and I don't think that the level just now is a heavy hand. Turning his head to look at Harabel, whose hair was almost unscathed, Kuna Mashiro blinked her eyes, and it seemed that she did not suffer any damage, but Kuna Mashiro's body flicked and rushed towards Kensei, punching him in the abdomen when Kensei did not respond. Mashiro, what are you doing? After receiving a punch from Kuna Mashiro, even with his body, he could not bear it. Taking a few steps back, Kuna Mashiro grabbed his wrist and asked in a deep voice. Are you stupid? Of course, I am fighting with you. Kimura said that this is a big fight. Kensei was not nervous and worried at all when his arm was grabbed by Kuna Mashiro. She twisted her waist and turned her body around with her arm as the center. Kuna Mashiro left leg severely hit on the shoulder of Kuna Mashiro. After receiving an attack on his shoulder, Kensei loosened his grip. Kuna Mashiro took the opportunity to break free. Not only did her body not retreat, but she twisted in the air and kicked Kensei's head again. Bang! Kensei reached out his arm to block her kick, but even so, he was kicked back a few steps by Kuna Mashiro. Kensei, you big fool, I have wanted to hit you for a long time. After kicking Kensei away, Kuna Mashiro happily twisted her body in the same place, looking very happy. You! Looking at Kuna Mashiro who was happily twisting over there, Kensei felt a burst of bitterness in his heart. Tia, you also come here quickly. The two of us will beat Kensei up. Yo, Tia, hurry up and come over. The two of us will beat up Kensei together. Hearing Kuna Mashiro words, Kensei's face changed. This girl. Although he had the upper hand in the battle just now, that was only because Harabel was not good at close combat. If he were to do it again, Kensei did not think that he would be able to get close to her again since Mashiro would get in his way. In the battle just now, Kensei had already confirmed that this Harabel was really a formidable enemy. In a one-on-one close-quarter fight, even he could not take advantage of her. Now, Mashiro actually wanted to join hands with her. You bastard. Harabel had yet to reply when he heard Kuna Mashiro's words, but Apache could not help but scold her, and her tone was extremely unhappy. I have said it many times, you crazy girl, you can't call Lord Harabel's name directly like this. Eh? Kuna Mashiro lowered her head and looked at Apache who was shouting over there in confusion. It was really difficult to understand why she was so excited just because she called her name. Apache, you are really strange. Isn't a name meant for people to call? What's more, Tia did not say anything. You bastard, I will kill you. Hearing Kuna Mashiro's understated words, Apache was so angry that she almost went crazy. That guy really made her angry. He actually dared to repeat the name of Harabel again and again. Mila Rose, why are you holding me? Let me go. I want to go up and kill that girl. You are no match for her alone. Mila Rose looked up at Mashiro in the air, and her expression was slightly ferocious. But this girl actually dares to be disrespectful to Lord Harabel. The two of us will attack together and kill her. Okay, that's it, the two of us will attack together. Although I usually don't like you, that Mashiro fellow actually dares to do this. This time, let her experience the power of our cooperation. Although I really don't want to disturb you two when I see you two being so loving and harmonious. Damn Sun. Who did you say is loving and harmonious? Sun had not even finished speaking when he said. On the other side, Apache and Mila Rose already roaring at the same time. Don't worry, I know. Sun covered his mouth with one hand and waved his other hand over there, his face showing that he understood what he meant. Although I don't want to offend you, but if it's just the two of you, you're still no match for that crazy girl. Under the angry gazes of the two, Sun waved her hand and lightly changed the topic. That's why I want the three of us to attack together. TSK. Alright, let's go. Let's see how strong we are. Mila turned her head, but she didn't say anything. They knew that if there were only two of them, they wouldn't be able to defeat Mashiro. If they wanted to fight her, the three of them would have to attack at the same time. Then let's go. Let her see how strong we are. Apache shouted. Then, the three of them turned their heads and preparing to let White witness their combined strength. Nanny. As soon as they turned around, they saw Kuna Mashiro and Kensei, who were already fighting in the sky. The three of them immediately felt a burst of despair. The full-strength punch just hit empty air. The three of them were discussing here in vain. They did not expect that Mashiro had already started fighting. That girl. He really doesn't put us in his eyes. Seeing that Kuna Mashiro had abandoned them and began to fight with Kensei, the three of them were stunned at first, and then a ball of anger rose in their hearts. She actually ignored the three of them and began to fight with Kensei. She really did not put them in their eyes. Bastard. Mila Rose cursed, but before she could say anything else, Mashiro, who had been fighting with Kensei, was hit by Kensei's punch, and her body flew towards them like a cannonball. Are you alright? Although they were dissatisfied with Mashiro's previous actions, when they saw Mashiro being punched by Kensei, the three of them still stepped forward to catch her and asked. Of course I'm fine. Mashiro was only shaken by the strength of Kensei. After being caught by the three of them, she immediately regained her ability to move. She gently broke free from their arms and stood up. She glanced at her clothes that had been tattered by Kensei in the battle just now. A hint of anger rose in her eyes. Ah, Kensei actually broke my new clothes. She carefully picked up her clothes with her fingers and looked at the tattered parts with heartache. The anger in Kuna Mashiro's eyes became even stronger. Damn it! Kensei, you big dummy! With a forceful stomp of his feet, Mashiro's body suddenly sprang out, and the dust caused by the collision with the ground covered the three of them, causing their bodies to be covered in dust. Cough cough, damn it, this crazy girl. Waving the dust in front of them with his hand, the three of them gritted their teeth and said. True. Mashiro. Super Flash. Her body flew to the front of Kensei, and without saying a word, Mashiro sent out a powerful void flash from her leg. Buzz. A green void flash came from Mashiro's leg and hit Kensei's head without hesitation. This girl. Kensei did not expect that Kuna Mashiro would have such a fierce reaction, and actually directly sent out a virtual flash without saying anything. In a hurry, Kensei leaned his body to the side, but still did not completely avoid the attack from Mashiro, and was hit by her attack. Bastard! Taking a few steps back, Kensei took a look at his arm, and a trace of anger flashed in his eyes. Although he did not suffer much damage, but the arm of Kensei was still emitting black smoke. Obviously, even Kensei could not completely ignore the attack just now. Just as Kensei was still angry at Mashiro's sudden attack, a figure had quietly appeared behind him. With a wave of his hand, a yellow Ryoryoku was injected into the hollow part of the short blade. The whole Zanpakuto was dyed with a bright yellow color, and a slightly oppressive feeling was emitted from the blade. This is... Kensei seemed to sense it and suddenly turned his head. Then, he saw a Zanpakuto growing bigger and bigger in his sight. The danger from the blade made Kensei feel a chill. His sword, which was in his right hand, quickly turned and moved towards the attack in front of him. At the same time, he quickly waved his left hand on his face, and a mask instantly appeared on his face. His Ryoryoku suddenly exploded. At the same time, the sword in his hand finally collided with Haribel's attack. Bang! With a loud sound, Kensei involuntarily took a few steps back, and the arm holding the blade trembled slightly. Sure enough, after escaping from close combat, the strength that Haribel displayed was much stronger than before. Just as this thought flashed through his mind, before Kensei could stabilize himself, a figure suddenly fell from the sky, and her raised right foot hacked down on Kensei's head with a shocking momentum. This girl. Feeling the whistling wind in his ear, Kensei looked up and saw Kuna Mashiro, familiar figure, falling from the sky, and her feet were coming down with a strong force. There was no time to dodge, and Kensei crossed his hands to block above his head. Boom! At the moment when Mashiro's kick and Kensei's arm collided, a powerful force instantly erupted. Kuna Mashiro kicked Kensei down from the sky with a huge force. This girl is really crazy. Isn't she the one with the best relationship with Kensei? I thought she would help Kensei deal with Lord Haribel. Looking at the huge hole created by Kensei in the distance, the three people looked at each other. They could not understand why Kuna Mashiro was attacking Kensei so desperately. Bankai. Tekken Tachikes. A low voice suddenly came from the other side of Kensei, and then accompanied by the rise of a powerful Ryoryoku, a whirlwind blew up, blowing all the smoke around Kensei, revealing Kensei in the middle. After Bankai, his Zanpakuto transforms from a single combat knife into a pair of large knuckle blades which Kensei holds in each hand. Both blades have a curved silver edge, which tapers off to an outward point on either side. Segmented purple bands wrap around the entirety of his arms, much like armor, while a thicker purple band arches behind him, over his head, with its ends protruding from under his shoulders. This is his Bankai. Looking at Muguruma Kensei on the ground, Haribel whispered with a few points of novelty in her tone. Shinigami's Bankai was rare, it's her first time to see their Bankai. That Kensei, they seem to be fighting very fiercely over there. Feeling the familiar Ryuryoku, several people in the battle stopped a little, and Love looked at that direction from afar and said. Although the battle over there is really fierce, and it has reached the point of Bankai, but the battle on our side is not idle enough to let you have time to see other people's battle. The body flashed and appeared beside Love, and Rose's tone was slightly solemn. Indeed, although this might felt a bit unencouraging, but even if the three people work together to deal with Kimura, it is still a little difficult. Hirako Shinji appeared on the other side and teased. However, his eyes did not leave Muyang's body at all. It was obvious that he was extremely vigilant in his heart. At this time, the masks on the faces of Hirako Shinji and the other two had already passed the time limit. Because of this, even if they had three people, it was very difficult to face Muyang, who had not even released Zanpakuto. After all, with Muyang's body, whether in strength or speed, he was completely superior to them. And the cutting technique was what Muyang was good at. They could be said to have no advantage at all over Muyang. Let's continue. Just in this period of time, I felt that your physical reaction ability has improved a lot. It is obvious that you have recovered the feeling of fighting. But this is not enough. As he said that, Muyang raised the sword in his hand and rushed forward again. Night, a full moon hung high in the air. What's wrong? You are not sleeping in the middle of the night. This is not Stark's style. Muyang walked from below to the roof and looked at Stark, who was sitting there quietly, with his back against the corner and looking at the moon. Nothing. Stark looked at the moon. After a long time, he turned his head. His eyes looked up and glanced at Muyang, who had come to his side. He said softly, and then turned to look at the moon in the air again. Hee. With a soft smile, Muyang sat down next to Stark and took out two small bottles from his arms. After handing one to Stark, Muyang looked up and took a sip. The spicy wine flowed down his throat. Muyang suddenly felt a comfortable feeling in his heart. Sure enough, the feeling of white wine was more nostalgic. How is it? Is the moon in the modern world comparable to Hueco Mundo? Hueco Mundo does not have a full moon. The moon in Hueco Mundo is always the same crescent moon. Stark whispered, then unscrewed the bottle cap and drank the wine that Muyang handed to himself. Cough 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 cough. Just drank a mouthful of it, Stark immediately flushed and coughed. What kind of wine is this? Why is it so spicy? Ha 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 ha. Seeing that Stark actually drank white wine in such a big mouth, and then choked by white wine, Muyang could not help laughing loudly. Seeing Muyang's gloating look, Stark could not help but say with dissatisfaction, and the expression on his face is also very melancholy. This is the wine of my hometown. Muyang smiled a little less, and the smile on his face faded. He turned his head to look at the moon in the air, and his tone was a little melancholy. Hometown. When he heard the place that Muyang had spat out, a hint of confusion appeared on Stark's face. Where is his hometown? Hueco Mundo. However, even though he was talking about his hometown like this, it was only a thought in his heart right now. Who could tell exactly where his hometown was now? Perhaps it was just a thought in his heart. Muyang shook the wine pot in his hand, his thoughts flying around. He said softly. However, now this is my home. Here are my friends. Here are my fetters. This is our territory. What do you say, Stark? Well, it's really troublesome. Tucker stood up and reached out to scratch his hair. There was a bit of fatigue in his tone, but the expression on his face was a little subtle. It's better to have a good sleep on such a quiet night, but there is always a strange feeling tonight, as if something important is going to happen. However, I won't stay here with you. I'd better go back and have a good sleep. Recently, I have been pulled to be a sparring partner, and I have no chance to have a good sleep. Stark waved his hand and walked downstairs. His posture was as free and easy as ever. The depression and melancholy feeling on his body disappeared without a trace. Ah. Muyang waved his hand at Stark's back. He still sat there, holding the bottle in his hand and drinking slowly. Although his eyes seemed to be looking at the full moon in the sky, Muyang's eyes had no focus. Obviously, he was not really admiring the moon. And his thoughts had already drifted to somewhere. Lying on his bed, Kurosaki Ichigo did not feel sleepy at all. The image of the woman he saw during the day kept replaying in his mind. Of course, this was not because he was starting to be interested in the woman's body when he was in the middle of spring. Instead, it was because the woman's stunning appearance during the day and the things she did. Just as Kurosaki Ichigo was lost in his thoughts, his expression suddenly changed and he looked at his window. This is. A black butterfly flew in through his window. Then, under Kurosaki Ichigo's slightly panicked gaze, a woman in a black kimono flew into his room. What? You. Looking at the familiar figure that appeared in front of him, Kurosaki Ichigo could not help but recall everything he had seen during the day. The woman in black moved her hand and gently placed it on the sword at her waist. She recalled the scene she had seen during the day. This woman had cut a huge monster in half with a swing of her sword. Kurosaki Ichigo suddenly felt a panic in his heart. He retreated and leaned against the wall. Kurosaki Ichigo asked. Who are you? What do you want to do? Very close. As if she did not hear what Kurosaki Ichigo said, the woman in black kimono jumped down from Kurosaki Ichigo's table and held the sword at her waist with a serious expression. What are you talking about? You idiot. Seeing that the girl actually ignored him and was muttering something on her own, Kurosaki Ichigo felt his head heat up. The sense of uneasiness he had toward her was immediately suppressed. He stepped forward and kicked her, knocking her to the ground. Who the hell are you? What are you doing here? Kurosaki Ichigo pointed at the person lying on the ground and asked with dissatisfaction. You can see me. And you kicked me? The woman lying on the ground turned to look at Kurosaki Ichigo with a face full of disbelief. It was obvious that she was in disbelief that she was seen and attacked by humans. I don't know what you are talking about. Of course I can see you. You are the person I met on the street this morning. You only realized now. It is impossible for ordinary people to see me. The woman in black reached out her hand and touched Kurosaki Ichigo with some doubt. She was very curious about this human who could see her and touch her. I don't know what you are talking about. Kurosaki Ichigo pushed away the woman's hand in dissatisfaction and kicked her. The woman in black jumped up and stepped on Kurosaki Ichigo's head, landing on the ground as if nothing had happened. You. Kurosaki Ichigo, who had been kicked to the ground, turned around and looked at the woman in black. She gnashed her teeth and said. Then I'll tell you. The woman in black turned around with a serious expression on her face. I am Shinigami. On the rooftop of Anding District, Muyang was still sitting there, slowly drinking wine. His eyes were focused on the moon, not knowing what he was thinking. What's wrong? Why do you look like you have a lot of worries? Putting a coat on Muyang, Suzuki Kusu, who had come up at some point in time, leaned against him and said softly, her tone was very gentle. Oh, it's Kusu. Muyang snapped out of his thoughts and glanced at Suzuki Kusu, who was sitting next to him. He called out softly, then picked up the bottle in his hand and took another sip. Is there something troubling you? Seeing Muyang drinking wine with the bottle, Suzuki Kusu asked in a low voice, her tone as gentle as ever. You can also feel what is happening right now. N. Suzuki Kusu replied softly. She looked in a direction. There were a few Ryuryokus reactions over there. One of them was Kurosaki Ichigo, who had come over frequently during this period of time. There were two other Ryuryoku beside him. One of them was Shinigami's Ryuryoku, while the other was Hollow. Are you worried about Kurosaki Ichigo? Don't worry about what Kurosaki Ichigo. Kisuke will handle it well. Suzuki Kusu asked curiously. Muyang shook his head lightly. He was not worried about Kurosaki Ichigo at all. His current reaction was more like a strange feeling for the Bleach manga that he was reading in his previous life. The scenes he saw on the screen were about to be reflected in front of him. He was not just a spectator. He was going to play an important role in the plot that he was familiar with in his previous life. This strange feeling was indescribable, and he could not share it with others. He could only feel his strange mood in his heart. Seeing Muyang shake his head without saying anything, Suzuki Kusu did not ask any more. As a smart woman, she knew that it was enough for her to stay quietly at the side at this time. Moreover, wasn't it what she had been waiting for? Pfft. A spray of blood sprayed out in front of Kurosaki Ichigo's eyes. Looking at the woman in black in front of him who was bitten by the monster named Hollow, a strange feeling arose in Kurosaki Ichigo's heart. Why was this girl who called herself Shinigami standing in front of him without any regard for her own safety? Why was she willing to sacrifice her life for a person who did not even know her name? At this moment, a strange feeling arose in Kurosaki Ichigo's heart towards this woman who called herself Shinigami, and for the first time, he had a strange feeling about Shinigami's profession. He struggled with all his might to force the hollow back, and the woman in black fell to the ground powerlessly. Shinigami! Kurosaki Ichigo cried out involuntarily. You idiot, you can't defeat him alone. Didn't I warn you just now? Or, do you think that as long as he eats your soul, all of this will stop? This will only become the bait of those guys. Struggling to climb under a telephone pole and sitting with her back against it, the black-clothed death god asked Ichigo, you want to save your family, right? Nonsense, what can I do? There is only one way. The black-clothed Shinigami pointed the sword in his hand at Kurosaki Ichigo, you will become Shinigami. What? What are you talking about? Looking at this guy with an unknown origin who was speaking with unknown reasons, Kurosaki Ichigo asked with a frown. Do you still not understand? Pushing his glasses on the bridge of his nose, Ishida Yuri's glasses reflected a ray of light. Looking at Kurosaki Ichigo, who was wearing a dead tyrant suit and holding a huge zanpakuto in his hand, Ishida Yuri did not hide his feelings at all. Kurosaki Ichigo, I hate you. Ha! Damn it, who the hell is that guy? Walking in the corridor outside the classroom, Kurosaki Ichigo still found it hard to let go of what happened last night. Being taught a lesson by a person he met for the first time really made him unable to swallow this anger. At that time, he was shocked by his sudden appearance. He did not have time to have a proper discussion with that guy and let him go. Thinking back to last night when that guy said those words in front of him with a proud look, Kurosaki Ichigo felt a burst of unhappiness in his heart. Why did he have to be scolded by a person he met for the first time? That bastard, the next time I see him, I must teach him a good lesson. Kurosaki Ichigo thought fiercely in his heart, then suddenly stopped, a trace of thinking flashed in his eyes. That guy, is that what is his name? Kurosaki Ichigo stood on the spot and pondered. It seems to be called Ishida something, Ishida Shiryu. No, that seems to be an artist who can't get famous, Ishida. Just as Kurosaki Ichigo was thinking hard, a beautiful figure suddenly came out from his side. Looking at the bitter thinking and muttering Kurosaki Ichigo, he reminded, are you thinking about Ishida again? Kurosaki-kun. Ah, it's nothing. Kurosaki Ichigo turned his head and looked at Orihime standing on the well behind him. He was slightly stunned. It's Ishida Yuri. Tilting her head, she said. Looking at Kurosaki Ichigo, who had a blank expression on his face, Orihime reminded him. Ah oh. Kurosaki Ichigo turned around and looked at Orihime, who was in the well behind him, and said with a bit of unfamiliarity, Inoue, do you know him very well? I don't know him very well either. It's just that he and I are from the same handicraft club. I only know his name. A handicraft club? Hearing Orihime's answer, Kurosaki Ichigo opened his mouth wide, his face full of disbelief. The arrogant guy he saw last night was from the handicraft club. Under the guidance of Orihime Inoue, Kurosaki Ichigo sneaked a glance at Ishida Yuri who was sitting in the classroom. There was absolutely no mistake. It was indeed the arrogant guy who claimed to be the Quincy that he saw last night. However, after witnessing that guy using a wonderful needle line to repair the cloth doll for his classmate, Kurosaki Ichigo was completely stunned. Was this guy who was skilled at handwork really the same person as the powerful and arrogant guy he saw last night? After school, on the way home, Ishida Yuri held his schoolbag diagonally and walked back with a calm face. Suddenly, Ishida Yuri, who was walking, stopped and said without looking back, "Are you following me home?" Kurosaki Ichigo. TSK, you saw through it. Kurosaki Ichigo walked out from the shadows and looked at Ishida Yuri, who had stopped not far away. He asked, "When did you find out?" "It started when you and Orihime Inoue peeked at me at the door of the classroom." Ishida Yuri turned slightly and said to Kurosaki Ichigo behind him in a tone that was absolutely not friendly. "Amazing. You really have a set of skills. That's because your spiritual energy is like an idiot running around everywhere. Even the monkeys know about it." Ishida did not respond to Kurosaki Ichigo's praise at all. Instead, he began to mock Kurosaki Ichigo's terrible spiritual energy perception ability. "I think you lack the ability to detect people with high spiritual energy levels. It is the best proof that you have not discovered my existence so far. I'm really sorry, I can't remember other people's faces and names." "It's not like that, I noticed it." There was no intention of accepting Kurosaki Ichigo's apology at all. Ishida Yuri habitually pushed his glasses and began his mocking skill. "It starts when you enter this school. Your spiritual power is unusually high, and you have the power of the god of death since late May. And the true identity of Kachiki Rukia, I also know about it." Following Ishida Yuri's words, Kurosaki Ichigo's expression became worse and worse. This guy in front of him seemed to know everything. This feeling was really terrible. Just as Ishida Yuri finished speaking, Kurosaki Ichigo saw white ribbons appear around his body. Spirit channels. That's right, these are spirit channels. Something that compresses the spiritual chi in the atmosphere, and... Just as Ishida finished speaking, Kurosaki Ichigo saw a figure flash in front of him. Ishida, who was originally standing a few meters away, instantly appeared in front of him. A hand suddenly clenched in front of him. Then, under Kurosaki Ichigo's astonished gaze, a red ribbon appeared in his hand. "This is..." Looking at the ribbon in front of him, Kurosaki Ichigo asked. "Your spirit channels." After snapping the red spirit channels in his hands, Ishida Yuri continued to show off his knowledge in front of Kurosaki Ichigo, while also spreading basic knowledge for him. "Don't you know? The color of Shinigami's spirit channels is different from others. It is red." Letting go of his hand, he turned the spirit channels in his hand into spirit particles and dissipated. Ishida Yuri looked at Kurosaki Ichigo and began to provoke him. "Do you want to have a competition? Kurosaki Ichigo, take a look and see which one of us is better. I will let you understand. There is no need for Shinigami in this world." Just when Ishida Yuri issued a challenge to Kurosaki Ichigo, Kachiki Rukia has come to the Urahara shop. She is going to find Kisuke, the profiteer, to ask something. Although the guy usually looks unreliable, he should know something she does not know. Entering Kisuke's store, Kachiki Rukia did not talk much nonsense with him and directly asked him what he had been concerned about since yesterday. "Quincy. I haven't heard this name for a long time." Kisuke put down the teacup, the small paper fan in his hand gently shook, and said in his usual tone. "This is really a very nostalgic name. I have not heard this name for almost 200 years. What the hell is going on?" Hearing the words of Kisuke and Tsukabashi Tessai, Kachiki Rukia opened her mouth and asked. The so-called Quincy is the clan that has been scattered all over the world to fight against Hollow. However, it has been wiped out more than 200 years ago. Wiped out? That's right. For now, people with abilities like Ryatsu can sense the existence of Hollow and should consciously step forward to cultivate. This is their origin. Just like Shinigami, they all want to destroy the Hollow, but there is a decisive difference between them and Shinigami. Is it to kill the Hollow or purify them? Compared to Shinigami using Zanpakuto to purify them and then send them to Soul Society, the Quincy are persistent in completely eliminating the Hollow. Think carefully, this is based on a very human idea. In the face of the Hollow that hurts friends and relatives, it is too lenient for them to be sent back to Soul Society. Of course, they think this way. So they want to kill the Hollow and always have the belief to get justice for their companions. But it is because of this belief that they are wiped out. Kuchiki Rukia solemnly listened to Kisuke talk about such a thing, and her heart felt a little heavy. At the same time. Fight? Me and you? Ichigo looked at the guy in front of him. That's right. This is too funny. After a while, Kurosaki Ichigo suddenly spoke. Just as Ishida Yuri frowned and asked again, Kurosaki Ichigo continued, "Why do you have to do this? It's really funny. I don't know what kind of conflict you have with Shinigami. Anyway, it has nothing to do with me. I am very surprised." Ishida Yuri looked at the guy in front of him. "Are you running away? I will not accept your terms. Why should I compete with you?" Hearing the words of this guy in front of him, Kurosaki Ichigo replied and turned to leave, ignoring him. "Ah, that's right, I remember now." Looking at the back of Kurosaki Ichigo, Ishida Yuri pushed up his glasses, opened his mouth, and began to provoke again. "You are Shinigami, who has been granted strength by Kuchiki Rukia. In other words, substitute Shinigami. Without her permission, you can't even move a finger." "What did you say?" Hearing Ishida Yuri's words, Kurosaki Ichigo stopped and turned to look at Ishida Yuri. This age of youth really could not be transferred. It was not easy for Kurosaki Ichigo to hold back just now. "Well, let's have a competition, your so-called victory and defeat." He opened his bag and took out the little doll with the soul inside. Kurosaki Ichigo ignored his resistance and took out the soul pill from his mouth. He wiped his clothes with disgust. Kurosaki Ichigo put the soul pill into his mouth and then Kurosaki Ichigo, who had transformed into Shinigami, came out of his body. "Come on, hurry up and explain the rules of victory and defeat." The two of them looked at each other and saw the flames burning in each other's eyes. "So." Ishida Yuri loosened his hand and shot out a bow and arrow. Seeing the dissipating Hollow in the distance, he whispered, 11. Feeling the increasingly oppressive Ryuryoku coming from the air, Ishida Yuri gradually had a bad feeling in his heart. He always felt that something bad was about to happen, but he could not feel what it was. With Ishida Yuri's outstanding perception ability, Ryuryoku, he could easily sense any Hollow in this town, but for some reason, he also felt a looming danger within those Hollow that he has slain. Damn it! Kurosaki Ichigo ran quickly on the road with Zanpakuto in his hand. Thinking of the words of the guy who called himself Extermination Master not long ago, Kurosaki Ichigo could not help but burn with anger. To actually use the bait that could attract the void in order to fight with the two of them, for the small matter between the two, put everyone in danger. And get lost. Waving Zanpakuto in his hand, Kurosaki Ichigo quickly solved all the Hollows in front of him, and then continued to run quickly. At this time, Karen should have been out of school. Thinking of hearing what Ishida Yuri said just now, Hollow will look for person with high Ryuryoku to attack, which his younger sister Karen possessed. Thinking of this, Kurosaki Ichigo was even more nervous. If Karen was really unlucky. Thinking of this terrifying situation, Kurosaki Ichigo ran even faster. A black hole appeared in the sky. Accompanied by a terrifying roar, a strangely shaped hollow emerged from it. A pair of eyes revealed a greedy look as he looked at the city below. From there, he could feel the scent of an attractive soul. Seeing the void suddenly appear in the sky, Kurosaki Ichigo stopped. He raised Zanpakuto in his hand, jumped up, and suddenly slashed down, cutting the hollow that had just appeared into two pieces. After getting rid of hollow in front of him, Kurosaki Ichigo looked around and felt a trace of anxiety in his heart. He had encountered more and more hollow on the road, but he had not found any trace of Karen until now. If this continued, Karen, the guy in front of him. Feeling the vague shadow in front of him, he said. Chad couldn't help but think that if only he could see more clearly, he wouldn't have to be like this where he could only vaguely sense and flee in a sorry state, at least he could attack him. Uncle, quickly dodge, it's on the left. He didn't have time to correct the way Ichigo's younger sister addressed him as uncle. In any case, he was already used to it. Hearing her loud reminder by his ear, Chad jumped up without thinking, bringing his younger sister who was being carried behind him to dodge. Then, he felt an attack hit the place where he was originally standing. The storm of attacks caused his body to retreat. Holding the person behind him, Chad turned and ran. Since he could not see the enemy clearly and could not attack him, it was better to run away quickly. After all, he was not alone now. He also had Ichigo's sister on his back. Uncle, on the left. Hearing Karen's reminder, Chad jumped and avoided another attack from the monster. When his body jumped in the air, Chad felt that his eyes suddenly became clear. He clearly saw a thick arm waving in front of his eyes. His eyes focused, and without a second thought, Chad threw a punch at the arm in front of him. It was fine if he couldn't see it, but now that he could see the monster in front of him, he couldn't let go of this opportunity to attack. Chad hit the monster's arm with all his strength, but he didn't feel any reaction from the monster, as if his accumulated strength attack had no effect on him. Before he could be surprised, not long after Chad threw a punch, the monster in front of him flipped his palm and hit Chad. Before his body could react, Chad subconsciously hugged Ichigo's sister tightly in his arms. In the next moment, he felt a strong force hit him, and his body was sent flying without any resistance. Uncle, are you okay? Uncle. Uncle. Looking at Sato Yasutora who was lying on the ground with blood all over his head, Karen climbed out of his arms and gently pushed his body. She asked with concern. The appearance of his brother's friend in front of her was really worrying her. Karen, what happened to you? And what happened to this uncle who is covered in blood? Feeling the movement here, Karen's classmate ran over and looked at Karen who was sitting on the ground and Chad who was beside her and asked strangely. Idiot, don't come over, leave quickly. Seeing the monster that appeared behind her classmate, Kurosaki Karen anxiously shouted to several students in front of her. If they did not leave, they would be killed by this monster. Seeing that several students still had no reaction, and the monster had appeared behind them, with a ferocious look on his face, Karen jumped up and threw her classmate to the ground. Seeing Karen who jumped up regardless of her own safety, Chad's mind was full of thoughts. He instantly remembered his grandfather's teachings when he was young. A will rose in his heart. Under the support of that will, Chad slowly stood up and looked at the monster in front of him. The reason why my fist is huge is not to hurt people. The reason why my body is tall is to protect others. Clenching his fists, Chad stood up and looked at the monster who punched himself in front of him. His eyes were firm, and his heart was burning with an indestructible will. I know all this, so just a little, please give me strength. Looking at the fist coming towards him with the whistling sound of the wind, there was no fear in the eyes of Chad. His body did not retreat at all. Instead, he clenched his right fist and punched at the fist in front of him without retreating at all. Boom! There was a loud noise and a brilliant light. The moment when Chad collided with the empty fist, a powerful Ryuryoku erupted in an instant. After the light dissipated, one of Chad's arms was wrapped in a layer of black substance. It looked full of power. After destroying one of the arms of the monster with one punch, Chad became more confident. He rushed forward, raised his right hand, and punched at the monster in front of him. With a powerful attack from his right hand, the monster in front of him turned into spirit particles and dissipated. Tatsuki. Seeing that her good friend was attacked by the monster, Orihime, who was on the well, suddenly shook and burst out a lot stronger than usual. She immediately broke free from the few people who trapped her, and then ran to her good friend, Tatsuki. Bang! Orihime had just run up to Tatsuki, but before she could check her condition, a foot suddenly kicked her in the stomach. Cough cough. After receiving a strong kick, Orihime squatted on the ground with his stomach in his arms and coughed violently. Looking at Tatsuki, who stood up in a strange posture, her eyes were full of bitterness and sadness. Thinking back to how he and Tatsuki knew each other and met each other, a strange emotion was brewing in the heart of Orihime. Although her body was being controlled, Tatsuki still clearly knew what she had just done. Orihime was her best friend. She had always been protecting and helping her, but she had actually kicked her just now. Her body could not be controlled and she was being controlled by the monster. However, two streams of tears uncontrollably flowed down Tatsuki's eyes. Please don't cry. Tatsuki, it's my turn to protect you this time. Orihime suddenly stood up from the ground and reached out to hug the friend in front of him. This was the best friend who had been protecting her since he was in junior high. Tears welled up in her eyes. Right at this moment, a dazzling light suddenly emitted from the hair clip on Orihime's head. The light that it emitted caused Hollow, who was not far away, to feel a wave of shock, and along with the burst of dazzling light, there was also a powerful Ryoryoku. What? Seeing the girl in front of him suddenly burst out with powerful fluctuations, the Hollow was shocked. The scene that happened in front of him shocked him. A mere human could actually explode with such a powerful Ryoryoku. What exactly was going on? There was no time to think about it. At the same time that Orihime and Ryoryoku exploded, a whirlwind circled around her, blowing everything around her away. Whether it was the students around her who were being controlled or the one not far away. Didn't Tatsuki say before that the person you want to fight seems to have found the wrong person? But it shouldn't be like that. The person you hurt is the wrong person. I will definitely not let anyone who hurts Tatsuki go. The whirlwind around gradually dissipated, revealing Orihime, who was standing in the middle. At this time, her entire body emitted a powerful aura. Her appearance was completely different from when she was in the past, making the Hollow feel waves of shock. What exactly is going on with you? Why is there a strange fluctuation coming from your entire body? Looking at this human little girl in front of him, this Hollow heart suddenly felt a trace of uneasiness, as if something terrible was about to happen. Koden Zanshuan, I reject. A ray of light flashed, and the Hollow that had been showing off before suddenly turned into spirit particles and disappeared. This is... Stark, who was lazily lying on the table and stirring the spoon, suddenly stopped the action in his hand. He looked up at Muyang, who was sitting opposite him, and asked with a bit of laziness, "Is it really okay, this kind of Ryoryoku?" Muyang put down the book in his hand and glanced outside. He certainly felt the heavy breath in the air. And the moment he felt it, he had already released his perception. He already knew what happened outside, but... I'm reading a book right now. I'm very busy. Glancing at the book that Muyang had closed, the corners of Stark's mouth twitched slightly. This guy. How is it? The book I lent you is not bad, right? This was specially chosen for you by me. It's absolutely wonderful. Lisa, who was silently reading a book, suddenly raised her head to look at Muyang and said. Ah. Kimura, you actually borrow an erotic book from Lisa. Lilinette, who was eating a lollipop and reading a comic book, suddenly jumped up and pointed at Muyang. Instantly, the attention of several people in the shop was attracted by her cry. It's nothing special, I'm just curious about some things. Lisa withdrew her gaze from the book in her hand and retorted unhappily. Isn't it too late for puberty? Love suddenly added. Cough cough. Muyang's face turned slightly red after being called out by Lillinette. Although everyone knew, it was really embarrassing for him to call it that. Putting the book in his hand into his arms, Muyang's face quickly calmed down, and there was a serious look on his face. Although Kisuke will deal with everything, I think it is better to go and see. Knowing that Muyang was changing the topic, Stark did not break it. He just smiled at him and continued to immerse himself in the cup in front of him. Feeling the comfortable feeling of the sun shining on his body, Stark felt sleepy. As for other things, naturally others will solve them. How is it? Lillinette, do you want to go with me? TSK. Glancing at Muyang, Lillinette buried her head in the manga again, not going out with him at all. Muyang rubbed his nose awkwardly, but was rejected by the little girl. Forget it, Kusu, you should go with me to take a look. Muyang stood up and casually took the hat that was placed on the table. He said to Suzuki Kusu who was sitting at the side. Putting the hat on, Muyang and Suzuki Kusu walked out of the coffee shop. TSK, you say you don't care, but you are still worried to death. Seeing Muyang and Suzuki Kusu go out together, Hiyori who was lying on the side curled his lips and said. After all, so many hollow appeared at once. It is inevitable that Kimura can't be at ease. So many hollow appeared in the modern world. I wonder what kind of impact it will have on the human world. Hirako Shinji, who was leaning on the side, had a straw in his mouth. When he heard Hiyori muttering, he said indifferently. Even he was a little worried in his heart. Who knew if there would be a hollow that slipped through the net and affected the life of human beings? So what? Rishir turned his head around and said, I hate humans. Who cares what they will do? Ah Hiyori, don't you like to go to human entertainment places? Yesterday, you even dragged me to play in the arcade. Why do you hate humans so much? Kuna Mashiroi, who had appeared out of nowhere, was lying beside Hiyori's head. He looked at her with her chin in her hands and asked curiously, her tone was serious, and even her expression was very serious. Hate is hate. How can there be so many reasons? Seeing Kuna Mashiro lying on the side of her head, Hiyori got up unhappily, raised his eyebrows and looked at Kuna Mashiro who was lying there and doing nothing. Aren't you with Kensei? Why are you here? Kensei, that big fool. Hearing Hiyori mentioned exactly what he was unhappy about, Kuna Mashiro sat up and grumbled his mouth dissatisfiedly. Kensei, the big idiot, is still practicing below. She beat me up because he lost against me and Tia. Hearing Kuna Mashiro words, Hirako Shinji and others mourned for Kuna Mashiro. Every time she trained, she would be beaten up by this guy named Kensei. Kusu, what's the situation now? After walking out of the gate of the Anding district, Muyang pressed his hat to block the sun above his head. It was already summer now, and the sun was still very strong at this time. Don't worry, I've been watching. Up until now, there haven't been any casualties among the humans. Of course, I didn't interfere with Orihime and Chad Yasutora. They have already been brought back by Kisuke. However, how did you know that the two of them actually had that kind of power in their bodies? Speaking up to this point, Suzuki Kusu looked at Muyang curiously. Suzuki Kusu was really curious about the fact that Muyang had predicted what was about to happen to the two of them from the beginning. If not for the fact that Muyang had specially greeted her, she would have already dealt with them when the two hollow creatures were about to attack humans. You want to know? Muyang turned to look at Suzuki Kusu on the side, his eyes revealing a trace of a smile. Secret. Humph. Seeing Muyang pretending to be mysterious, Suzuki Kusu pouted unhappily. Only in front of Muyang would she make such a move and expression. Roar. Right at this moment, a hollow charged towards the two of them. While roaring, it opened its mouth wide and bared its fangs and claws as it charged towards them. Just as the hollow was about to approach them, a white, almost transparent thread suddenly shot out from the void and struck the hollow head. The seemingly fragile thread pierced through the hollow head without any resistance in an instant. The hollow that was originally roaring instantly turned into spirit particles and dissipated into nothingness. The thread also immediately concealed itself after killing the hollow. Kusu, your strength is really getting stronger and stronger. You're joking again. It's just that dealing with this kind of weak hollow is nothing amazing. At the very least, that sneak attack just now was very strong, and its ability to hide is much stronger than before. Suzuki Kusu calmly accepted Muyang's praise. It was not that she had not done anything in the past 100 years. It was only right for her to increase her strength a little. It would be ridiculous if her strength did not improve at all. Let's go, we will go to Kisuk first. Halfway through his words, Muyang suddenly stopped talking and turned his eyes to the sky. That is. Not only Muyang, but Suzuki Kusu also felt that unusual fluctuation at the first moment. Although she had never been to the Hueco Mundo, but she must not forget that there were several great hollow living around them. At this time, she would definitely not be mistaken about the Ryuryoku in the air. Great hollow. Suzuki Kusu turned to look at Muyang, her tone carrying a trace of fluctuation. That's great hollow. Isn't Kisuk going a little too far? Although Kurosaki Ichigo is very talented and there is indeed a powerful Ryuryoku in his body, he is too inexperienced to fight Great Hollow in such a short time. Don't worry. With Kisuk's ability, he won't be as reckless as you think he is. Since he dares to do this, he naturally has a reason to do so. We just have to go and watch. Even if he really can't do it, it's just the lowest level of Jillian. Do you think Kurosaki Ichigo would be in trouble? Let's go. We will go directly to Kurosaki Ichigo. Kisuk will go there later. After that, Muyang did not wait for Suzuki Kusu to say anything. He directly led the way to the source of that Ryuryoku, who was Kurosaki Ichigo. Although they said to go, the two of them only flashed in the air a few times and arrived at the place where Kurosaki Ichigo and the others were. Oh, Kisuk, Tessai, long time no see. His figure flashed and appeared in front of Kisuk and the other three. Muyang waved to Kisuk and Tessai. Wow, isn't this Mr. Kimura? It's really been a long time. Have you been well recently? It's okay, it's okay. But you, has your small shop not closed yet? Nope. Fortunately, there are still some old customers to help. So, it has not closed down. I heard that your shop has been doing very well recently, Mr. Kimura. Mr. Kimura, Miss Kusu. The Tsukabushi Tessai looked at the two people in front of him and bowed politely. Waha, I almost forgot about you Kusu. It has been a long time since I last saw you and you have become much more beautiful. Kisuk shook the small paper fan in his hand and said to Suzuki Kusu with a smile. He nodded to Kisuk and the Tsukabushi Tessai as a greeting. Suzuki Kusu quietly stood behind Muyang. Aya, are those two kids there you and Tessai's children? They have already grown so big. Ha! Kisuk, who was waving the small fan in his hand, was stunned. The paper fan in his hand could no longer be swayed. However, he was only stunned for a moment. With Kisuk's face, he instantly returned to his original state. He used the small paper fan in his hand to cover half of his face. He waved to Muyang and said. You're so annoying. Mr. Kimura, you're joking again. Are we really the store manager and Mr. Tessai's children? Yururu glanced at Kisuk and asked Jinta beside her. How is that possible? Yururu, you fool, have you ever seen a man and a man have children? But that person said so. Looking at Muyang who was chatting with Kisuk, Yururu continued, her little face full of conflict. Do you believe what others say? Yururu, you idiot. Jayanta looked at Xiao Yu in front of him and said in a bad tone. If not for the fact that there were still many things waiting for him to clean up, he would have definitely cleaned Yururu up first. These two people. Kuchiki Rukia looked at Muyang and Suzuki Kusu, who suddenly appeared and chatted with Kisuke. There was a surge of shock in her heart. Although she could not feel any Ryuryoku from the two people in front of her, the way these two people appeared before made her unable to help but be shocked. That was Shunpa. Appearing in front of her without the slightest awareness, even a trace of their steps could not be captured. Who were they? Was it that her strength had not recovered? No, even if her strength had not recovered, it was not to the point where she could not even see the traces of people moving. If she wanted to make herself unable to even capture the traces of movement, at least to the extent of Brother Byakuya. The two people in front of her had the strength of a captain. Suzuki Kusu turned to look at Kuchiki Rukia on the side and nodded to her. With a gentle smile, after the strength increased, people like Rukia, as long as there was a violent emotional fluctuation around her, she could perceive it at the first time. The violent emotional fluctuation in Rukia's heart just now, she naturally also perceived it. Seeing the extremely beautiful woman turn to look at herself and smile at herself, Rukia was shocked again. The eyes just now made her feel as if everything was seen through. Suppressing the various emotions in her heart, Rukia knew that now was not the time to think about other problems. The most important thing now was still the problem of Hollow, especially the Great Hollow. Turning her head, Rukia saw Ichigo holding Zanpakuto, shouting and rushing directly to the Great Hollow. Bastard! Are you looking for death? Don't go over, go back. That is not something you can deal with. Seeing that Kurosaki Ichigo unexpectedly rushed to the Great Hollow, Rukia could not help but curse. With the level where he was in, rushing up like this was tantamount to suicide. Kisuke-san. Rukia took a step and shouted at Kisuke, who was standing next to her. Although she did not know who he was, but looking at his mysterious appearance, it should be. Perhaps he could solve the problem in front of him. In short, he could not let Kurosaki Ichigo rush up to die. Hearing Rukia's cry to herself, Kisuke, who was still teasing Muyang, stopped talking with Muyang and turned his eyes to the huge hollow. Seeing Rukia move her foot and want to go forward to help Ichigo, Kisuke's arm crossed and blocked in front of her. Kisuke-san, what do you want to do? Are you going to let him die? Looking at Kisuke, who was blocking her, Rukia asked in a deep voice. How can it be? Kisuke said with a smile in his usual tone. Then you get out of the way, I have to stop him, he can't beat that hollow at all. How can that be, Miss Kuchiki, you can't do this, please watch obediently. Kisuke's palm fingers in front of Rukia moved slightly, and Rukia immediately felt an invisible fluctuation bind her, and she could no longer make any movements. This is Bakud. I can't move. Rukia weakly sat on the ground, her eyes full of horror. Although she saw Muyang and Suzuki Kusu appear and chat with Kisuke, Rukia secretly guessed that Kisuke was not as simple as she saw, but she did not expect that this guy could subdue her so easily. This is a battle that must be fought, whether it is for you or him. Kisuke did not look at Rukia, who was subdued by himself, with his hands in his pocket. He looked at Kurosaki Ichigo, who raised his hand and rushed to the Great Hollow, and there was a flash of expectation in his eyes. Seeing that the real play was about to begin, Muyang also stopped teasing Kisuke. He stood in the same place and looked at Kurosaki Ichigo, and there was a flash of surprise in his eyes. It should be said that he was worthy of being the protagonist, and there was a terrible Ryuryoku in his body. Although it did not burst out now, it was rough estimate that he was at least comparable to Ryuryoku of the third seat. Thinking about how he had spent several years, it was not easy to reach the level of vice-captain. Just when Muyang was jealous of Kurosaki Ichigo's natural strength, the battle over there had reached the most critical moment. Kicking away Kurosaki Ichigo, who was rushing to himself, the Great Hollow looked around, a red Ryuryoku gathered at his mouth, a terrible Ryuryoku gathered there. Just sensing that kind of Ryuryoku, it made Rukia shocked. It's Zero. Is it going to use Zero in this kind of place? Feeling the hollow sharply rising Ryuryoku, Rukia's heart was full of anxiety. If she was hit by that thing, she would definitely dead in an instant. Run, Ichigo. In the eyes of Rukia, the great hollow aimed at the place where Kurosaki Ichigo was and directly sent a flash. Ah! Looking at the hollow's Zero shooting out from the sky, Kurosaki Ichigo raised his hand without thinking and used the Zanpakuto in his hand to block the attack. Kurosaki. This guy, how come? Seeing Kurosaki Ichigo rushing forward and trying to block the void flash, Ishida let out a cry of surprise. Ryuryoku, at that level, and he actually wanted to block it by himself. It was really too stupid. Just as this thought flashed through Ishida's mind, before he had any other reaction, he was shocked to see Zanpakuto in Kurosaki Ichigo's hand blocking the Zero. Could it be? Ishida Yuri recalled what Kurosaki Ichigo told him before. He had never controlled Ryuryoku. Could it be that the Ryuryoku he usually showed was only a little bit of the real Ryuryoku, and now what he showed was his true strength? Just as this thought flashed through his mind, Ishida Yuri felt an incomparably powerful Ryuryoku burst out from Kurosaki Ichigo's body. The sudden burst of Ryuryoku even caused waves of air waves, forcing his body to retreat a few steps. How is this possible? This kind of Ryuryoku. Under the pressure of the Zero, Kurosaki Ichigo unleashed his Ryuryoku, even becoming corporeal. The blue Ryuryoku wrapped around his body visible to the naked eyes, bringing a deep shock to Ishida Yuri. Not only Ishida Yuri, but Rukia, who was sitting on the ground powerlessly on the other side, was also extremely shocked. Ichigo, he could actually burst out such a powerful Ryuryoku. Obviously, his Shinigami strength was given to him by her, so why could he exert such a powerful Ryuryoku? Ah! Ishida Yuri and Rukia's mind were naturally in disarray. Meanwhile Ichigo, under the threat of Zero, he only knew that he had to desperately burst out all his Ryatsu, otherwise, not only himself, but everyone would be destroyed by this monster. With the roar of Kurosaki Ichigo, waves of Ryuryoku kept pouring out from the depths of his body, and his Ryuryoku continued to rise under the pressure of Zero, as if there was no end. Ha! With a shout, Ryuryoku, who had exploded from Kurosaki Ichigo's body, gathered together. With the wave of Zanpakuto in his hand, a slash from the bottom to the top split the hollow into two halves. Not only that, but the powerful slash even cut the hollow from the bottom to the top into two halves. Being hit by Kurosaki Ichigo's slash, the great hollow screamed in pain. Then he took a few steps back and pulled the sky as if he had pulled the curtain. He covered his body and retreated to an unknown place. He actually forced Great Hollow back. Seeing that the Great Hollow was repelled, Rukia let out a cry of disbelief. Ichigo actually repelled Great Hollow. This was really beyond her imagination. Even in Gotei 13, she had never heard of anyone who repelled Great Hollow. Of course, it was also possible that it was because her qualifications were shallow, so she had not come into contact with those things. I guess that means it's my win. After forcing the Great Hollow back, Kurosaki Ichigo turned around and made a victory gesture to Ishida Yuri. Amazing! Seeing that Kurosaki Ichigo had forced back Great Hollow with a single slash, Muyang sincerely praised. Although this kind of Great Hollow would be a child's play for Muyang, Kurosaki Ichigo, who had been a Shinigami substitute without any professional training, had actually completed such a battle record in such a short period of time after obtaining Shinigami's strength. Even Muyang could not help but be convinced. As expected of the protagonist, Suzuki Kusu nodded with deep feelings. Kurosaki Ichigo's great improvement made her raise her eyebrows. This kind of improvement speed was really shocking. Seeing that Kurosaki Ichigo gradually suppressed the raging Ryuryoku with the help of Ishida Yuri, Muyang nodded and turned to leave. I'm going back, Kusu. Let's go. Kisuke, Tessai. I'll leave the rest to you. Don't be in such a hurry to leave. I still have something to discuss with you. Mr. Tensai, I'll leave the space problem to you. Kisuke instructed Tsukabashi Tensai, then took a few steps forward to follow Muyang. Are we really the store manager and Mr. Tensai's children? Yururu glanced at Kisuke and asked Jinta beside her. How is that possible? Yururu, you fool, have you ever seen a man and a man have children? But that person said so. Looking at Muyang who was chatting with Kisuke, Yururu continued, her little face full of conflict. Do you believe what others say? Yururu, you idiot. Jayanta looked at Xiao Yu in front of him and said in a bad tone. If not for the fact that there were still many things waiting for him to clean up, he would have definitely cleaned Yururu up first. These two people. Kuchiki Rukia looked at Muyang and Suzuki Kusu who suddenly appeared and chatted with Kisuke. There was a surge of shock in her heart. Although she could not feel any Ryuryoku from the two people in front of her, the way these two people appeared before made her unable to help but be shocked. That was Shunpa. Appearing in front of her without the slightest awareness, even a trace of their steps could not be captured. Who were they? Was it that her strength had not recovered? No, even if her strength had not recovered, it was not to the point where she could not even see the traces of people moving. If she wanted to make herself unable to even capture the traces of movement, at least to the extent of Brother Byakuya. The two people in front of her had the strength of a captain. Suzuki Kusu turned to look at Kuchiki Rukia on the side and nodded to her. With a gentle smile, after the strength increased, people like Rukia, as long as there was a violent emotional fluctuation around her, she could perceive it at the first time. The violent emotional fluctuation in Rukia's heart just now, she naturally also perceived it. Seeing the extremely beautiful woman turn to look at herself and smile at herself, Rukia was shocked again. The eyes just now made her feel as if everything was seen through. Suppressing the various emotions in her heart, Rukia knew that now was not the time to think about other problems. The most important thing now was still the problem of Hollow, especially the Great Hollow. Turning her head, Rukia saw Ichigo holding Zanpakuto, shouting and rushing directly to the Great Hollow. Bastard! Are you looking for death? Don't go over, go back. That is not something you can deal with. Seeing that Kurosaki Ichigo unexpectedly rushed to the Great Hollow, Rukia could not help but curse. With the level where he was in, rushing up like this was tantamount to suicide. Kisuke-san. Rukia took a step and shouted at Kisuke, who was standing next to her. Although she did not know who he was, but looking at his mysterious appearance, it should be. Perhaps he could solve the problem in front of him. In short, he could not let Kurosaki Ichigo rush up to die. Hearing Rukia's cry to herself, Kisuke, who was still teasing Muyang, stopped talking with Muyang and turned his eyes to the huge hollow. Seeing Rukia move her foot and want to go forward to help Ichigo, Kisuke's arm crossed and blocked in front of her. Kisuke-san, what do you want to do? Are you going to let him die? Looking at Kisuke who was blocking her, Rukia asked in a deep voice. How can it be? Kisuke said with a smile in his usual tone. Then you get out of the way, I have to stop him, he can't beat that hollow at all. How can that be, Miss Kuchiki, you can't do this, please watch obediently. Kisuke's palm fingers in front of Rukia moved slightly, and Rukia immediately felt an invisible fluctuation bind her, and she could no longer make any movements. This is Bakud. I can't move. Rukia weakly sat on the ground, her eyes full of horror. Although she saw Muyang and Suzuki Kusu appear and chat with Kisuke, Rukia secretly guessed that Kisuke was not as simple as she saw, but she did not expect that this guy could subdue her so easily. This is a battle that must be fought, whether it is for you or him. Kisuke did not look at Rukia, who was subdued by himself, with his hands in his pocket. He looked at Kurosaki Ichigo who raised his hand and rushed to the Great Hollow, and there was a flash of expectation in his eyes. Seeing that the real play was about to begin, Muyang also stopped teasing Kisuke. He stood in the same place and looked at Kurosaki Ichigo, and there was a flash of surprise in his eyes. It should be said that he was worthy of being the protagonist, and there was a terrible Ryuryoku in his body. Although it did not burst out now, it was rough estimate that he was at least comparable to Ryuryoku of the third seat. Thinking about how he had spent several years, it was not easy to reach the level of vice captain. Just when Muyang was jealous of Kurosaki Ichigo's natural strength, the battle over there had reached the most critical moment. Kicking away Kurosaki Ichigo who was rushing to himself, the Great Hollow looked around, a red Ryuryoku gathered at his mouth, a terrible Ryuryoku gathered there, just sensing that kind of Ryuryoku, it made Rukia shocked. It's Zero. Is it going to use Zero in this kind of place? Feeling the hollow sharply rising Ryuryoku, Rukia's heart was full of anxiety. If she was hit by that thing, she would definitely dead in an instant. Run, Ichigo. In the eyes of Rukia, the Great Hollow aimed at the place where Kurosaki Ichigo was and directly sent a flash. Ah! Looking at the hollow's Zero shooting out from the sky, Kurosaki Ichigo raised his hand without thinking and used the Zanpakuto in his hand to block the attack. Kurosaki. This guy how come? Seeing Kurosaki Ichigo rushing forward and trying to block the void flash, Ishida let out a cry of surprise. Ryuryoku, at that level, and he actually wanted to block it by himself. It was really too stupid. Just as this thought flashed through Ishida's mind, before he had any other reaction, he was shocked to see Zanpakuto in Kurosaki Ichigo's hand blocking the Zero. Could it be? Ishida Yuri recalled what Kurosaki Ichigo told him before. He had never controlled Ryuryoku. Could it be that the Ryuryoku he usually showed was only a little bit of the real Ryuryoku, and now what he showed was his true strength? Just as this thought flashed through his mind, Ishida Yuri felt an incomparably powerful Ryuryoku burst out from Kurosaki Ichigo's body. The sudden burst of Ryuryoku even caused waves of air waves, forcing his body to retreat a few steps. How is this possible? This kind of Ryuryoku. Under the pressure of the Zero, Kurosaki Ichigo unleashed his Ryuryoku, even becoming corporeal. The blue Ryuryoku wrapped around his body visible to the naked eyes, bringing a deep shock to Ishida Yuri. Not only Ishida Yuri, but Rukia, who was sitting on the ground powerlessly on the other side, was also extremely shocked. Ichigo he could actually burst out such a powerful Ryuryoku. Obviously, his Shinigami strength was given to him by her, so why could he exert such a powerful Ryuryoku? Ah! Ishida Yuri and Rukia's mind were naturally in disarray. Meanwhile Ichigo, under the threat of Zero, he only knew that he had to desperately burst out all his Ryatsu, otherwise, not only himself, but everyone would be destroyed by this monster. With the roar of Kurosaki Ichigo, waves of Ryuryoku kept pouring out from the depths of his body, and his Ryuryoku continued to rise under the pressure of Zero, as if there was no end. Ha! With a shout, Ryuryoku, who had exploded from Kurosaki Ichigo's body, gathered together. With the wave of Zanpakuto in his hand, a slash from the bottom to the top split the hollow into two halves. Not only that, but the powerful slash even cut the hollow from the bottom to the top into two halves. Being hit by Kurosaki Ichigo's slash, the Great Hollow screamed in pain. Then he took a few steps back and pulled the sky as if he had pulled the curtain. He covered his body and retreated to an unknown place. He actually forced Great Hollow back. Seeing that the Great Hollow was repelled, Rukia let out a cry of disbelief. Ichigo actually repelled Great Hollow. This was really beyond her imagination. Even in Gotei 13, she had never heard of anyone who repelled Great Hollow. Of course, it was also possible that it was because her qualifications were shallow, so she had not come into contact with those things. I guess that means it's my win. After forcing the Great Hollow back, Kurosaki Ichigo turned around and made a victory gesture to Ishida Yuri. Amazing! Seeing that Kurosaki Ichigo had forced back Great Hollow with a single slash, Muyang sincerely praised. Although this kind of Great Hollow would be a child's play for Muyang, Kurosaki Ichigo, who had been a Shinigami substitute without any professional training, had actually completed such a battle record in such a short period of time after obtaining Shinigami's strength. Even Muyang could not help but be convinced. As expected of the protagonist, Suzuki Kusu nodded with deep feelings. Kurosaki Ichigo's great improvement made her raise her eyebrows. This kind of improvement speed was really shocking. Seeing that Kurosaki Ichigo gradually suppressed the raging Ryuryoku with the help of Ishida Yuri, Muyang nodded and turned to leave.